actually had water coming into the house. So right, I called him. I said, I think you are going to have to clean those ice dams.
Well, don't do
You were mocking me.
don't do what one of our friends did.
Yeah, about a week ago, he should have been clear.
Who burned his house to the ground.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
He was
that's one
a
way of
former
cleaning things
cop,
out.
former Long Meadow cop.
1 minute?
Yeah, John Madura, yeah.
He used one of those guns that you take wallpaper off.
Oh, my God.
Stand by.
Second, 2015 Select Board meeting for Town of Long Meadow. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, let's see, Stephen, I guess you got an announcement starting out tonight on the Citizen of the Year memo. Are you going to read that, or you want me to read it?
I can read it, or you can.
Okay.
Are you queued up?
Interested parties from the Select Board. The Long Meadow School Board, our Select Board is accepting nominations for its annual Citizens of the Year Award. The recipient will be announced at the annual town meeting on May 12, 2015. Letters of nomination should be mailed to the Select Board office at 20 William Street or emailed to Debbie House at dhouse@longmeadow.org by Friday, April 10th, 2015. I think this is not available to any elected official or people on boards. Is that correct? This is just citizenry.
I believe so.
I believe it's just
and town manager.
yeah, and town manager.
No, I believe it is limited to people who are not on board.
Not on active
Although,
on.
I thought
Committees.
maybe
Appointed,
not elected.
not elected.
Appointed boards, yes. Elected boards, no. I
Okay.
think that's the rule. Right.
Okay.
Can I follow up with another announcement?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because actually we were
Absolutely.
talking about this before the meeting. I think the point is well taken. With the snow that we've had and expecting a little more, especially rain on Wednesday, we're really doing the best we can to keep drainage inlets and curb and gutter structures as clear as possible. We know that the streets have gotten narrow with the amount of snow that we've had. If you see that a drain inlet or a gutter or something like that is blocked, we did announce that YourGov app that you can get from the App Store from your carrier. I encourage people to download the app and use it to take a picture and send in the location. Please include your contact information when you send in a request so we can reach out to you if further follow-up is needed. As of now, we can't really respond to anonymous reports.
Right.
So, or if you feel like the streets are too narrow, we've been trying to get out and open corners and widen streets as we can, but with limited manpower and equipment, and especially with a piece of equipment that was essential to that operation being down, it's a little tougher. But please use the app to let us know where spots that need to be addressed are.
Is there a complaint number where we can complain about the temperatures?
Yeah. Well, you can call 567-3400 as well at the DPW. If you don't want to use the app, you can call the DPW or email to send in a complaint. You can register a complaint about the temperatures, and we will get right on that.
Yeah, and I guess prior to going on air, there was a discussion on the board of a home in our town that apparently is burnt.
No, it was a while back. That was years ago.
Oh, years ago. Excuse me. I thought it was something current.
No, years.
We were talking about the ice dams and out there. Be aware, folks, that people are getting hurt on these roofs, and the ice dam problem is significant this year. Be very careful, and you might want to call in a professional to have that taken care of. There's going to be a lot of damage on roofs this year. Okay, resident comments. I see nobody for the resident comments. Or did you come in for resident comments?
No, I'm here for the audit committee.
Okay. Seeing no resident comments, we'll move on to select board comments.
Richard, I just have one. I would like to ask that we add to the agenda or add as best we can a follow-up to our discussion at the last meeting on the two water department issues. One was supplemental meters for irrigation, and the other, I think we're going to handle when it comes to our warrant discussion, I suspect, on billing systems for water.
Is that a motion to amend the agenda?
Sure, I move that we amend the agenda.
Second.
Tonight's agenda?
Yeah,
Okay.
just so we can have a discussion about it.
Any discussion on the amendment? All in favor? Aye. Okay.
Thanks.
We'll slip it in, what are you on, our old business, Mark?
Sure.
Okay. Other select board comments? Okay. It's not really under comments, it's something I need to bring to the board. I've been contacted by Senator Lesser's office. They want to set up a time to come meet the board and entertain questions or have some type of format in front of the select board in our town. And I haven't got anything out to you guys yet because we had the budget, and I did tell our office that we'd like to get through the budget process first. Any thoughts about, at this time, of setting up a meeting date?
Whenever looks good.
Okay. So as soon as we clear the budget, I'll just pick a date and we'll, okay.
Can I ask, I'm sorry, go ahead, Maria, had her hand up.
Well, just off of that, several of us were at that, what was it, Chamber of Commerce breakfast that had the governor, and the lieutenant came over and spoke to our table and said she really was hoping that she would be able to have a chance to get together with a lot of select groups. And I told her we had a meeting set up with Ludlow coming up in March. It's probably too soon for her, but I told her I would agree to reach out and try to get a regional meeting together because she set up that community relations board that we sent that letter out, or I sent that letter out to, in regards to the retiree health insurance. So I'll follow up on that and let the board know if the other select boards appear to be interested in, probably when I attend that regional meeting.
Okay. Any other select board comments?
Yeah, if we're going to have our state senator here, I mean, I think we all know him and have met with him prior to tonight. I'd like to have points of discussion as opposed to getting a state of the state address from a state senator. And rather than just have an open, here I am, I'd like to meet you and say hi, we can do that on our own. I like to make it effective, and there's issues I know that are before the town, and perhaps the town manager working with some of the department heads can address some of these unfunded mandates that might be coming down, or things that we've had trouble keeping up with, and bring those to the attention of the state senator.
What's your thoughts, Stephen?
Would you want a little bit of time to prepare something?
Yeah, well, we'd like to get 3 or 4 weeks. You want to head up the effort on putting together a
Yeah,
points?
sure. I mean, we can prepare a list of
Do some coordination with the
some
board?
legislative list. I mean, some department heads are pretty in tune with through their professional associations with legislative agendas for like the fire chief and the police chief, and some of the specialized ones are knowledgeable. We can certainly look at some of the things that are of concern and potentially unfunded.
Yes, Maria.
And following up on that, remember this, I brought it up weeks ago. This is that MMA legislative package of what was recommended that the municipalities might be interested in. I highlighted a few, but again, depends if the department heads feel these are really valuable, so I'll just pass that on to you. Oh, you do? Okay. Does anyone else want a copy of this? Did I send it to you?
Yeah, you
I
wrote
did.
this.
Okay.
And of course, I don't think we're going to have to tell our local senator to be able to grasp the mic and talk to us. I'm sure he will.
Yeah, he does have that. I know he
he
has
can't
the
speak
list.
for him.
Oh, he does have a list?
Yeah,
Okay.
I know he's MMA. We are a member of MMA, the Massachusetts Municipal Association, and their legislative team does provide good service to the town, and it does carry the water, metaphorically speaking, for the town, even when we're not watching the state legislative deliberations.
Right.
MMA is and keeps us informed.
Right, they do a good job. The other point that we had some brief discussion on, if we're having the senator in, do we want to also set up a time at this point to have our state rep come in? maybe the next week after that, the next meeting?
And in the past, we've tried to have each of them, in prior years, we've had each of them come in once or twice a year.
Right.
So
Okay.
I have no problem with doing that. But again, I agree with Paul, I think we ought to go in there with an agenda as opposed
Yeah.
to turning our meeting
No,
over
I
to
agree. Yeah, I think it should be well organized. Stephen, and as a point, though, why don't you write a note to look at our annual calendar? Because it's not on our annual calendar, and Mark's right. Everybody's right. That should be once or twice a year that we invite him in. Have it represented back on our calendar. Okay. Anybody else have any select board comments? Okay. I mentioned the roof, so we got the roof one now. There is one thing. I noticed you had said you were in for the audit committee? Yeah.
Yeah, we do.
I'm not seeing anything on the agenda for audit.
Sure it is.
It's item,
It is. Under new business, Paul.
Acceptance of financial statements?
That's it. That's it.
item
Okay.
1, yeah.
Okay.
That's it.
It said audit committee? Okay. All right. Town manager report.
Thanks, Richard. So you can, I did include in the town manager report the most recent correspondence we sent to Eversource, formerly Wamiko. I did get basically an acknowledgement of receipt from Mr. Burke saying that he was going to run up the management team and would get back to us. That has not happened. A couple of items. On Friday, we did complete the checklist with Gilbane for outstanding items associated with the construction of the high school, and we did issue final payment to them. As I sent you an email a few minutes ago, the police chief, Robert Ciano, has notified me in writing of his intent to retire effective June 30th. I hope you get a chance to look at his letter. It was a thoughtful note about his 40-plus years of service to the town. And he's born and bred and worked in the town for his entire career, and is a tremendously valuable asset to the team. And so he'll be sorely missed. We did receive proposals on a couple of items that we've talked about quite a bit. Today we received the proposals back, or we received 2 proposals back for our garbage collection contract. And we are in the process of evaluating those. As well, we received 4 proposals from firms interested in doing the feasibility and preliminary design work for the DPW facility. And we are also in the process of evaluating those. We received those on Friday afternoon. So those 2 issues are kind of moving along. I have not reviewed it, but I do understand there is a preliminary draft of the Regional Emergency Communication Center feasibility study as well. So that project is moving along too. We also have our work with Civic Plus on the website has been ongoing. We had a webinar with them late last week, and saw a proposed what they call a mood board, which is pictures and kind of a color scheme, as well as a proposed layout for the main page as well as sub pages. And I think it's going to be a much more dynamic interface with the general public than we currently have. And I think it's not on the agenda, but we do need to set and announce our budget forum as soon as possible.
Yeah, I've got a note on that.
Oh, and for any of you who have not completed your conflict of interest training that was sent out by the clerk, make sure you do that this week. Including, I know I've been procrastinating on that sort myself. So my understanding from the people who've done it is that set aside an hour or so, and you do it mostly online. But it's important to get that done.
Okay. Hey, let me throw in one thing. Why don't we talk about the budget forum right now, since it's current? I had a note on that. What is it originally scheduled on for the 11th? Yeah. And I haven't had a chance to talk to you guys yet on the subcommittee. Are we going to be ready on the 11th to go live? Anybody have any opposition to the 11th?
So you're talking about,
The townwide budget.
yeah, no,
forum
I know,
will
but
be
what date, March 11th?
March 11th.
Wednesday.
Oh, okay, so before we see it, we're going to have a budget forum?
We're going to get the budget. You're making a presentation tonight.
I mean, I'm gonna basically go through what was in the packet, which is the draft budget message, as well as the kind of overall budget summary, Excel document.
Okay.
In terms of the larger PowerPoint, I think that usually emerges after the select board has gone through the budget and done its
Right.
work, and then we
Yeah.
prepare one PowerPoint that we give to town meeting.
Well, why don't we hammer this down a little bit more right now? Right now, we've got a meeting scheduled on 3/5, 3/9, 3/11, and 3/16. We had 3 extra budget meetings scheduled. Mark, where are you guys? When are you going to be ready? You and Paul.
Well, I believe we're going to be ready next week, so, that there was going to be one meeting with this week, which was the overall select board, right, was the 9th.
Okay.
Now, I don't know where the
Next
11th
Monday, yeah.
came in from, because.
The 11th was one that was scheduled.
Right, and that's the Wednesday budget forum.
Right,
I
that's
would
the
think
forum.
that,
I guess we have the 3 meetings between that and the 11th, so that should be fine.
Well, I mean,
I don't know that we're going to need all 3 meetings. So,
Well, let's fill in the blanks then. We've got to have capital make a presentation. They haven't done that yet. And we're going to have the presentation to the board on the entire budget.
which begins tonight, essentially.
Okay, essentially tonight.
When I say presentation, like I said, I think we wanted to make sure that rather than me talking about the budget, you have in the packet what would be largely my narrative in the form of the budget message, along with the spreadsheet.
But putting that whole puzzle together, making the full presentation, is this your agreement that this is, what night are we going to do that for the whole board?
When you say that, I mean, we are missing the capital improvement plan,
Right,
which
we're
is a
missing the
part of
capital
budget.
program.
And that's, I've not heard back from the chair of the committee on the report. So I guess, I don't know, I mean, if the board wants to have a budget forum on what it is recommending to town meeting, that can happen anytime. If the board wants to get public input on its proposed budget numbers, then we can do that on the 11th, because the numbers really aren't going to change. And I have a kind of a canned PowerPoint showing the pie charts of the distribution of funding between the various functions of government. We have a line item as well as a summary budget, plus the message. Those are the tools I would use to present to the public, to basically outline where my recommended budget is that the select board's not going to take over. I think it's, where do you guys want to plug in with the public forum? I think it just depends on, I guess I would defer to the subcommittee to see how they feel it's.
Well, that's what I was trying to get up at. We've got 3 or 4 dates scheduled right now on the agenda. And I guess we're trying to figure out tonight, what meetings do we still want to hold, and what would be the purpose of each of those, so we can either get rid of something or get ready for our meetings.
If it's going to be the 11th, it's important to decide that tonight, because the advertising deadline for
Right,
Thursday's
it's got to be
paper
out tomorrow.
is tomorrow morning, and we want to get that in Thursday's paper so people have received notice.
Right.
So Richard, the question I have is, right now we have a preliminary schedule of the 5th, which is Thursday of this week, and then you'd just schedule Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday next week, the 9th, 10th, and 11th.
Right,
And my question is, I guess my comment would be that I only think we need 2 nights before the budget forum on the 11th, whether it's Thursday and Monday, which I would prefer, or Monday and Tuesday, or Thursday and Tuesday. I don't really care, but
Okay.
Paul, I don't know if you think at most we're going to need 2 nights before that budget forum.
So then that's really what we've got, is 2 nights scheduled right now before the budget forum.
No, we have 3. We have the 5th, the 9th, and the 10th on our.
Oh, okay, I missed one then, excuse me. I
I think we do.
didn't catch the 10th then.
We can always cancel a meeting. We can't post one, so I would just leave them all there.
Do we have one canceled or set up on the 10th? I didn't pick it up on my calendar. Okay, then I must not have my calendar. Okay, so there is one on 3/10 then. Okay, so you just need 2, then what
No, I
day?
would say just leave them there.
We can cancel them, but what
Yeah.
day, what do we want to, do we want to hold the 5th?
My preference would be have it Thursday, the 5th, continue
Okay.
at the 9th, and assume we're going to finish up, but if we don't, we carry it over till the 10th.
Okay, how about if we get Capital Online to come in Thursday night then?
That'd be nice if they're able to.
I don't,
Yeah.
I mean.
Should we
you have to
call
talk
right
to him
now?
about that.
Yeah, do you want to call Mr. Metz? You want me to call Mr. Metz?
Sure.
Sure what?
Sure, we should triangulate. I can send him a note right now. Ask him to try and be ready. Ask him if he's going to be ready for Thursday night.
Yeah, I think he's ready. I think he wanted to know when to make the presentation. And actually, in previous years, they sent their final report to the select board in advance of their presentation. And so I don't know if he's got it finished, but if he does, it'd be nice if he can get it in so we can get an eyeball on it before he walks in.
Rich, on the meeting calendar for the town, we have the 5th, the 9th, and the 10th. We do not have the 11th as a budget hearing.
Right, that's the form, that's the budget form. That's the one we're trying to
Yep.
figure out tonight, Paul. I put the wrong date down then.
Would
I
that
had-
be here? You want to have it here?
Yeah, where we had it last year. Did we have it at the Senior Center?
That was several years ago.
Was it several? Where did we have it last year?
I don't remember.
I thought we had it here.
The forum?
No, the
but I don't
budget.
know. For the budget for, oh, maybe
Yeah, I-
it would have been a fire station.
I do not
No,
remember.
I
Can
don't
you
know.
recall, Paul?
It's easier here with
think it matters.
LCTV.
No, it doesn't matter. I just
I don't
wanted
know
to
if we
think
had it
have it here,
available.
yeah.
Yeah, we'll have it here.
Oh,
The cameras are here.
Is
But I
there
don't know
any-
if the room is available.
Yeah, any conflict, we'll check on conflicts tomorrow on the 11th. So we'll set a place for it anyway, and we'll get the announcement out. Okay. So 3, the 3rd, the 9th, and
Fifth.
then the, drop the 10th, are we saying? Or we can drop it if we need to?
Right.
Okay. And then the budget forum on the 11th. Okay, and Stephen, you're going to get in touch with Mr. Metz?
As we speak.
Okay. Anything else, Mark? Paul?
It was a Greenwood Center, the
Yeah,
over
it's
60
good.
room last year.
Was it, is Greenwood Center
Oh,
over 60?
Greenwood, okay.
All right. All done? All set?
So we are scheduling it for the 11th.
Yeah. Schedule the 11th. And do it in here if they want to do it in here if there's no conflict. We got the cameras here. And I think we can accommodate just about as many here as you can at the Greenwood Center.
I think we also need to do something to notify the public.
Yeah, that's what he's going to do tomorrow. That's the press release has
The big
to go
thing is
tomorrow.
having it in the reminder, having the notification in the reminder.
Maybe we need to put the little signs up in each end of town. I know Alex has requested that in the past for forums, so we can put those little, what are they called? Sandwich things.
Sandwich boards.
Yes.
Put them up on top of the heaps of snow.
Yes.
Okay, I guess we'll move into old business. Motion for...
Can I just ask a couple of questions for the town managers?
Sure.
If I could. Stephen, a couple of things. One is the letter from Go Eversource, I guess they are now. Do you plan on, I know we don't want to negotiate here in public, but how do you plan on, you're going to wait to see what you get back from them? And you've got, I assume, a plan based on whatever you...
Yeah, I think, the letter lays out
Right.
the information we've been asking for months, and lays out that if they don't work with us on at least providing minimally the information we've requested, then we will pursue our options at the Department of Public Utilities, which is, if we said C in court, it's essentially at the DPU. And so our consultant and I have discussed this, and I think we were hoping to avoid that because it is costly and time consuming. But we'll see what we get from them on this one. But like I said,
If we'd
unfortunately,
done it 5 years ago, it would have been costly and time consuming. We'd have been done, hindsight's 20/20, I
Yeah.
get it.
so like I said, unfortunately, we're at, to some extent, in terms of this phase, we're at their mercy. It just depends on what the willingness of the board is to spend a pretty significant amount of money to go contest this. I mean, I think when you look at the potential funding, I don't want to say at risk, but what it means to the town in terms of the purchase price as well as possible overcharges, the money to hire consultants and lawyers to fight the thing really is less than I think what it's worth, but still you have to pay it up front before you get any kind of benefit. And that's what Mr. Woodbury will help us evaluate.
Okay. Another quick question. You talked about Civics Plus work for the website. One of the things I thought I had heard in the past about Civics Plus, and I'm not sure, but one of our concerns was, at the end of the day, who owns the code? You know, who owns the content? You weren't here, but when we switched over from our old website to our current website in WordPress, we spent a lot of effort with all of our minutes, with all the documents that we had in records, upgrading them and putting them into WordPress, recognizing that they're now ours. And I guess the question is, when we go to Civics Plus, can you just ask that question and make sure so that anything new we put into WordPress, if we want to ever go out of WordPress, you know, we don't have to print them off and retype them, you know, whatever it is. It's our code. That was a knock early on, I think, on WordPress. It may not have been, but I think I seem to recall it was. You know, it's kind of the who owns the code, not just who owns the structure or who owns the content. So if you could just check on that as part of your discussion, it'd be helpful.
I think the public own the content. In terms of the code of the, I mean, I'm sure there's some proprietary thing.
No, but I'm saying that you know, there was an organization that was doing it, and I thought it was Civics Plus, but, you know, that if you created or gave them the minutes and they uploaded the minutes, they were now in their system, and you couldn't get them out because they were part of theirs. And it was that kind of thing. Okay, I hope that Kevin Warenda would understand what it was we're talking about, and what our concern was, and you know, I don't know if it's, I don't know the phrase that deals with it, but that is a concern that we've had expressed before.
Is that it?
Yep.
Okay. I'm going to bump the schedule. Why don't we get the acceptance FY14 financial statements up, and then we can get that business taken care of.
Okay.
So, Paul, you two come on up. We're going to bump this schedule up.
Okay. Is everybody here? Is everybody here who's coming from the audit committee?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mark, are you talking, when you're talking about the website, is it akin to like Facebook owning whatever's posted on Facebook, even though you posted it in your site, your page or whatever? Is that what you?
Yeah, you know, I don't know if I don't know what the right word is, Paul. I think, though, you know, it has to do with, like I said, the last time we had stuff, you know, we had to re-enter a lot of data by printing it out and scanning it in. It was really time-consuming, as opposed to just being able to say, you know, here's the code, just upload it to the new website.
It's like when you switch your phone, everything's in the cloud and it goes right into your new phone. We shouldn't
the
have to
question
pay
is-
for the transfer of our
Is it,
data.
whose cloud is it? I think
Yeah.
is what it
Are we
is.
doing a PowerPoint or anything?
Should we get another table?
I had a babysitter.
Do you want to just pull another small table over, or?
So at 5-7,
One of those.
Kara's kids are with her.
Stephen, I was just going to say, you can take one of the ones to the.
Because they'll be off camera now. No one will be able to see Paul.
They can scan.
Oh, they can?
Thing, yeah.
Yeah, if you just want to, Tom, if you want to just pull that table, pull that table over. That's perfect.
And just so you know, you violated union rules, but that's okay. You'll be grieved tomorrow. You'll be grieved back.
Floor is all yours.
Fantastic, thank you. First, I'd like to apologize for any extraneous noise that my kids might be causing in the background prior to me starting talking, during my talk, and after. We're here to recommend that the Select Board accept the financial statements as audited by Scanlon and Associates. That's the purpose of this. Tom Scanlon Jr. has come here to present the financial statements. I'd like to take a moment to thank him, his father, his firm, for 20 years of service, 20-plus years of service to the town of Longmeadow. Our relationship is ending not because of anything, any animosity or anything else between us. The firm simply decided not to bid the next series of contracts. So we hope that in 3 years, when we re-up, we meet again. And without further ado, Mr. Scanlon.
How's everyone doing? So this is my last year. Been gonna miss working with the town, but hopefully in 3 years I'll see you back. So yeah, we're gonna walk through the financials with you. The audit went good this year. We were in here in the fall time. The town received an unmodified opinion, which is the best opinion the town can get. Again, just to recap kind of what an audit is. The sole purpose of the audit is to opine on your financial statements. It's not really to produce a management letter, believe it or not. Some people go right to the management letter. So we use a risk-based audit. We look at your controls over your financial statements, design our procedures off of there, assess risk, high risk, low risk, your significant activities, which your budgeting, your cash, your receivables. And that's kind of how we developed it. Our main purpose is to opine on your financial statements to see if they're free of material misstatement, whether by fraud or error. And again, we issued an unmodified opinion, which is good, and you'll help you out there in the bond market. Again, that's what you want to see. Just get the financial highlights. Your free cash was certified at $1,696,000. It's always good to know kind of where you're generating your free cash from and how you're setting your budget. You had return of appropriations of $930,000, which makes up that 1.6, and you had excess budget of state and local receipts of approximately $643,000. And I know we talked about reserves the last couple of years, and I know you adopted reserve fund policy of 5 to 10%. I think your goals were. And again, your two main components of that makes up your reserves are stabilization and free cash. And your stabilization fund is just under $2.2 million, which is good to see. So with the two of them combined, your budget being just over $55 million, you're in that 7% range. So you're right in that range if you want to be 5 to 10. We've been seeing some of our clients be up towards more of the 10% range when they're in that AA bond rating type thing. So again, you're coming off of a major storm where you had to fork over a significant amount of money, and that came out of your fund balance / free cash. So with that coming back to you, I think you're in pretty good shape as far as that goes. And again, your storm fund's coming to a close. I think roughly at the end of it, we're anticipating about $393,000 left over in that fund.
That was received in the fall.
Yeah, and that's
There's still some residual that's unaudited, I guess, by the federal government.
yeah. So that's going to become available as a reserve, whether you put it in the stabilization or back to free cash. Easily at home. Thought I got away with it for an hour. You had a large capital project coming to a close, which we're sitting in here at school. And again, at June 30th, when you look at the financial statements, there's a cash deficit of approximately $100,000, which will be your final reimbursement you're getting from MSBA if the project closes out. So it's more of a cash flow type thing. They hold 5% back. Those kind of the general highlights. One other thing just on the financial end is your collection rate when it comes to taxes is really good. That's kind of on the financial report. When you look at on page 67, that gives you a breakdown of the real estate taxes. And when we talk about collection rate, like your commitment divided by your collections net your refunds. And then you have 1 year outstanding, which is you're committed $44 million, you have $491,000 outstanding. So, doing a pretty good job collecting your taxes. That's kind of on the financial highlights. I don't want to get too involved in specific questions on. I know we've talked about OPEB in the past. I think I've stolen Paul's line a couple of times about having liability at the roads when he said that about 3 years ago. So I've used that in my other communities. Somewhere there lies the truth about OPEB. Your liability is approximately about $10 million. It grows by about $2.2 million a year. I think somewhere in there lies the truth. But again, I think more and more I've changed my opinion on OPEB as we go along as these things getting out of control. Again, $10 million. And you adopted a trust, and I want to say you got about $500,000 in the trust, I believe. It's how you're going to use the trust going forward. Is once you get money into it, I'm just going to throw a number out there. You know, when you get to like 3 or 4 million in a trust, it's how you're going to utilize that in accordance with your budget. So you have retirees' costs you're going to pay out of there. So that's going to factor into how you're setting your budget. So I think that's the next step when you come into OPEB, how you're going to utilize funding the trust and utilizing the retirees' costs in there. I know there's a lot of developing issues with OPEB. I know there's a new standard coming out here addressing the OPEB, and also as these OPEB trusts got adopted, I know there's been some opinions from the legal side of things. Is it does Mass General Law equal a true trust? You know, so I think that going forward can be issues with OPEB. Your plan redesign, you adopt an OPEB trust. And again, just don't throw money in OPEB trust just to say, I'm funding my OPEB trust. It's about how you're going to use it going forward. So I think that's the general highlights on the financial end of it. Any specific questions on that?
Yeah, if I can ask.
Yeah.
Because I think we got a different opinion either last year or the year before from representative from your
From Dan,
company.
yeah.
So, and I've had this conversation with Paul. If you start to talk about funding OPEB to our liability, we need about a $30 million override, which would take it out of the money generated from that, would then take it out of our operational budget every year.
Correct.
When it comes to the bond rating agencies, and I think the issue of us setting up the OPEB trust was specifically that when it gets to a certain level, you're going to start taking income off of it to offset the current obligation.
Correct.
But where does it make sense because now it's a line item in the budget to fund the OPEB trust every year. And I know that we've also, especially at this last town meeting, we threw some money in at the fall town meeting as well from free cash. So at what point in time does it, from your standpoint, do you see that, where does it become silly for funding it or overdone? And where's that sweet spot where you say, it makes a difference with the rating agencies, whether you have 5 million in there, 0, and because we're seeing different things. And the rating agencies are the rating agencies; they have their own rules and things like that. But where's that sweet spot? Is what we've done the right path, or is it?
I think what you're doing is the right path, and I would encourage that with all my communities. What you're doing, but you know, as we talk, your liability is 10 million. It grows about 2 million a year. That's the number you really need to focus on. Is that the true number? I know that has implicit rate stuff, so that would be the net impact on your budget every year. Would be the $2 million figure that you should be putting into the trust.
May I interject?
Yeah.
I mean, this is all based actuarially, and there was an article a month ago or so in the Wall Street Journal where actuaries are going to be using a number that expands the liability due to people living longer. So this is not a number where the rate of liability is going to decline unless healthcare costs come under control, people stop living longer. It's an issue, and it's going to continue to be an issue.
Yeah, I think it's how you think of the OPEB trust as a reserve. I mean, that's what you really. I think when you look at what does each physician have for a retiree cost or health insurance cost? So one physician can have, we have one community out east where they have 5 health insurance costs because they have 5 retirees plus 1 current. And it's at the fire chief's position. So when they looked at it, their health insurance just for the fire chief's position was somewhere around the ballpark like $70,000. So that's the focus on, can we eventually put money away today to use for tomorrow? And it kind of acts like a stabilization fund. So where's that sweet spot? I would say right now I'm encouraging people when you get to that 5 million mark of your size is starting to use how to fund it back into the budget.
Go ahead. Yeah, Paul and I spoke, we talked to Paul Strzyk about this, and so Tom, I'm looking at your comment at our finance subcommittee of are there any towns who are now differentiating between, past retirees and current employees, or even between current employees and the next generation employees, so that anybody new who's hired, you treat them or fund their retiree medical benefits differently. So you just, it's the kind of thing that, it's a 20-year problem, but 20 years it goes away because.
Yeah, no, I know Connecticut designed that if they hire anyone new, they say there's a $40,000 position, they would then put $5,000 or X percentage into the trust a year for 20 years, hoping that will pay. I know there's a couple of communities up in the Berkshires that when they hire someone, that's the way the position pays 50, well, they're going to knock it down to 45 and put 5 in a year. Like I said, somewhere in there lies the truth. It is a promise you made to your employees, and it is a cost that's growing. When you look at the chart, that's when you look at the OPEB study, $10 million jumps off the page as liability. I think that's more of an accounting procedure. But if you look at the chart of how your retiree health insurance is growing, that's because you have more people retiring than you do expiring. Good term one. You can see it growing. That's the scary part about it. And all those positions are reoccurring within each department. So that's kind of what you're pulling out of OPEB is how do I deal with it? How do I put money away from today that I can pay for tomorrow into this, reducing this amount?
And Mark, we actually do have that number. The actuarial study done, not the last time, but I think like 3 years ago, we asked for that number. What would it take, or what is the average cost of a new employee coming in? How much would we have to put aside? And I forget what it is, if it's $2,300 or a little bit more. But it was a fairly substantial amount of money if we had 10 or 15 people turning over a year to add that $40,000, $50,000 into that budget. But we do have that number, and it can be determined the next time we go out for an actuarial study, which we have to do very shortly.
Right. And Richard, just as a point, I think OPEB is also a point that's going to. There's a lot of politics involved in terms of not what the people are owed, but the policy of 50-year-old employees with 10 years of service being able to go out in full medical benefits. And, will the state at all ever address that or allow towns to potentially address that? Could have the bigger impact on, and maybe that's the kind of thing we should be talking to when we talk about bringing in our state senator and state representative about legislative relief on OPEB and not just on, just taxpayer relief.
That was also recommended, some of that legislative action, Marie, that you brought reference to. So they are working on it, but they're not working on it quick enough.
I have a couple other questions, if I could. I guess the question is for the audit committee is, even though the select board's ultimately responsible for the town finances and the audit, have you had a chance or have you asked to go and present this to the school committee? And I say that only because the audit correction report items have school committee issues in there. I think there was one that, I won't say it's recurring, but it hasn't been totally addressed as of last year, and I think that the school committee ought to hear about it so that they can take action administratively and not just, I'm sure, Paul, you've talked to Tom Mazza about it, I'm sure of that, but I think that there needs to be, just as we're elected for the town, the school committee's elected for this, to look at the school committee budget, and I would suggest you get a chance to just present this to the school committee, or at least them look at it, because there is a school committee component to this that's pretty substantial. Obviously, they're 65% of the town's budget. Anyway, I looked at the audit correction report, and I see what's going on there, but it's not anything you and I can do anything about, Richard, administratively.
Right.
First of all, thank you for the work. It's really important, and I know a lot of towns don't have this as part of it, and it's really important what you've been doing, so thank you for this work. I had a few questions. One, you mentioned something interesting now, Paul. Were you talking about $2,300 a year or just for the first year of hire?
It would be the first year plus every year afterwards.
Oh, it would be every year. It's not just like putting money away
right,
for...
Right, it would continue to grow. So if you had 10 employees that first year and you had to put $23,000, next year you added another 10 employees, you're now adding $46,000 and so on and so on.
Okay, so that's an interesting fact I never heard about. Yeah, we're sort of stuck because I know we're paying 50% of retiree health plan and can't go any lower than that by state law. So other states, other towns are at 80s, 90%, so we're in good shape that way. But the other number you said that I found interesting, which I didn't quite understand, was the $2.2 million a year. Are you saying that is really for us to fund our current costs, not our back costs, and we would have to be setting aside $2.2 million?
Yeah, the way it's developed, there's a developed thing called ARC, an annual required contribution. So they set your liability at a given point in time, and you can amortize that out over 30 years. That's one component of the ARC, and then you have your normal cost, which is a value on all your current employees, and that's part of the ARC.
And so this isn't really like saying we'll get fully funded in 30 years. This just says by putting away $2.2 million every year, we would just be keeping up with our current costs, not taking care of the backlog at all.
I think if we funded the ARC over the 30-year period,
You'd be fully funded.
we'd be fully funded, and then any time a person retired, they would have enough money in the so-called OPEB trust fund that we would not have to add to it, that we would only be paying for the employees per se at that point.
Oh,
Plus whatever their contribution for future is. But when the person retired, they would strictly just come out of the trust fund with no additional town's contribution because we would have made it the prior 30 years.
So it is fully funding by doing
Over a period of time.
2.2 for 30 years, we might get us there.
Right.
Okay.
But
The other,
Marie, you can do that also by funding $2,300 a person for every new person, because in 30 years, all the current employees will be retired, and you'll have been funding as you go, and so you'll
Well-
then have a fund built up that way.
that would partially fund you. I don't think it, but
Well,
my
who knows?
other question was, we're not a true trust fund. We're just, we call it a trust, but it hasn't become a trust. Do other towns definitely going to the trust?
I'd say you are a true trust.
But because I understood we had to take the second step where we couldn't pull it out except for,
Well, that's you're an irrevocable trust when you're governed by Mass General Law, Chapter 32, Section 20. When you adopted that, you adopted the irrevocability of it.
oh, really? So we're in good shape. That way we can say we have a trust.
Yes.
And that it cannot be, we can't take this out and decide we're going to build a road with it.
No, the only way to get money out is just charge retirees' health costs there. Now, for instance, we have a town that OPEB trust, and they have a significant portion of money in there. They have $7-8 million in their OPEB trust. And they need money within their budget. Well, they freed up by charging $1 million that was budgeted under their general fund appropriation to the trust. It freed up $1 million in their appropriation, and they voted out of their appropriation to the project. So you
Do it indirectly.
yeah, you're doing it indirectly. So irrevocable doesn't mean non-spendable. And that was a big misconception. People were saying like, oh, once we put it in the trust, it's non-spendable. No, it's just irrevocable. It can only be used for retirees' health costs.
Well, thank you. That was very helpful.
Yeah, Paul, I guess the question keeps coming back to me is, why hasn't it been recommended that we start funding future employees?
Why hasn't it been
Yeah, I mean,
recommended?
we know what we should be doing now for the employees we're hiring today.
Richard, there's been recommendations made to this board of years back, and my first recommendation probably 5 or 6 years ago was let's start on an incremental additional half a year, half a percent or quarter of a percent every year.
Yeah.
And we only got this line item started a couple years ago. We were lucky enough that in the FY16 budget, we increased the line item, the funding. So it's a matter of how you want to address it. If you want to address it by doing $2,300 per employee, we could do that, as opposed to what we did for FY16 is we increased the budgetary line item.
Right.
So there have been options proposed. I think it's just been concentrated on the fact that we've increased the budgetary amount. We've gone through. We said that there was, we had an ample amount of free cash. We put $250,000 out of free cash. So it's a choice of how you want to financing it. So, I mean, we can talk about alternatives to our current methodology, but I thought it was a pretty good step to, first of all, get it in the budget, never mind double it in this last fiscal year.
Right. But I mean, we really do sit here in full recognition that there is an unfunded liability that's going forward, and the people that we hire today. It's not just the employees we got, it's the ones we hire today. We're not even funding that liability. So we're never going to cure the problem. It's just going to get larger and larger as it goes along until there's a change in the hiring practices that.
And that right there is what you take out of OPEB, not what you just said. I mean, that's the thing it's addressing, is that you got to understand it, and I believe you just understood it, is that's the thing. You're making promises that are just building and building and building. If you look at that chart of your costs. I mean, it'll kind of scare you in a way when you look at it over a 20, 30-year period. And that's the whole thing, is that there's a hard cost associated with each employee, which is their pay,
Right.
and then it's a promise you made to them.
I think it'd be interesting to have this as a further discussion on an item, because the fact that you said there's a number that we can look to current employees or new employees, and I think it's also important that way we know each department what it's costing to hire a new employee and what the promises are being made, and sort of pulls into this whole idea of what Mark says about the school committee. So when we talk about new hirees, we really should have this understanding that this is the future costs or promises that are being made. I think it's worth it to have maybe a discussion in another meeting on how we can maybe have a hybrid form of funding of this, so that people really can understand each department when we put someone else in, or when are we going to reach that point where there are more retirees than active employees. And that, I know, is a tipping point that some towns have already hit. And fortunately, we're not there, but we have to realize that tipping point will come at some time. So it'd be worth a future discussion.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about it, it's going to come. There is a point.
Yeah, it's not going away in the near
No,
future.
we're kicking the can down the road and waiting for the next board to be elected, but it is going to hit.
You can consider it the same as the infrastructure.
Right.
I mean, we've made strides increasing the amount that we put in for infrastructure in FY16. So we've made some strides. It's just a matter of how you want to make those strides.
Yeah.
And what demand is going to be on the operating budget. It's funding priorities.
Right.
But again, Richard, a vote by the state legislature that would allow us or would change, retiree pension plans could do far more to change our OPEB, just as it did when we were allowed to change our medical benefits. It had a big impact on our OPEB liability because our medical plans changed. So we can do a lot, but there's an awful lot you can do legislatively as well.
Well, I totally agree, Mark, and that's what I'm saying. I think the board needs to be more active in what we are doing. I mean, everybody at this table understands it. It's out there, and we know it's still legislation's our easiest cure for this, but we don't have an active, I know there is some legislation being proposed, but even if it's every year, we go back with the same thing, and fight like the devil with it. I'd like to see the figures brought before the board every single year and say, okay, since last year, now here's how many new hires we got, and that bubble's growing, because it is growing, and it's slowly growing, and we're not talking about it, although we know it's happening every day.
Again, that would be one alternative to funding, there's no doubt.
Right. Yeah, and I know, the conference call that we had with Moody, they weren't too concerned today with this, but they said 2 years from now, they said the whole thing could change overnight. They were concerned about the pension systems, because we're also underfunding pension systems.
But I will say that the pension system is on we are making our ARC, the full for that, and it is on a funding schedule to be completed in 2036 or something to that nature.
Yeah. So we're on track on that.
We're on track on the pension, and that legislation, going back historically, Richard, that legislation, as far as putting that on a schedule, only became law in like 1991, I believe, somewhere in that vicinity where we had to fund that.
Right.
So it's not that old that we had or were required to fund the pension obligation. The next step would be the OPEB obligation.
Right, that's
Just
right.
don't know when that's coming.
Yeah, 1991, that's not that long ago. Not really. So. Any other questions? No?
Tom, I just want to again thank the Scanlon Associates for a lot of years of service to the town.
I enjoyed working for the towns. It was, hope to be back in 3 years.
Seeing no other questions, well, thank you very much
Thank you, Tom.
for your
Thank you.
presentation and for the audit committee's help and coming in dazzling for the figures.
Hopefully it'll be warm out when I leave.
Yeah.
We can fix that for you.
I think we gotta go way south to get warm, don't we?
Rich, I think, this has been brought up before. I think more than a few years ago,
Yeah.
I said, if you really want to address it, you go and do
We do.
an
It'd
override.
be good if they did.
Yeah.
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 Richard, we ought to have a motion to accept the audited
Yeah,
financial
yeah.
statement as presented, and I'd like to make that motion.
Okay. Second?
Second.
Second, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
All opposed? No. Thank you, folks.
It's okay.
It is, you know, like Paul was saying when the group was walking away, and he's mentioned a massive override to take this funding thing. And maybe that's what it's gonna take, but it's out there.
When we started talking about OPEB a few years ago, I brought that up, and
Yeah.
there was no flavor to, you don't have to do an operational override, you can do a debt exclusion override,
Right.
and, you know, and if it's that high of a priority, and at that time, the board didn't deem that it was.
A lot of towns, when we made those savings with the insurance, they took that full amount and they put it away and they became fully funded. So I think we've now, as Paul Pasternak said, we've come to realize this is serious. We're doing the funding. I think we should now start talking about dealing with negotiations on when we're doing salaries.
But you're right, we
Unfortunately,
did hear that some of the communities actually took that deferral and put it right in.
put it right in, and it took care of it, and
Yeah.
they caught right up. And we're making savings every year with our insurance, but I think we have to start focusing on the cost of each employee going forward, so that the promises are kept also.
Right. Stephen, would you like to continue on with the budget stuff at this point, or you want to drop back?
I'll defer to the,
I mean, the stuff that Paul's going to stay for.
I mean, I don't see why I should be the only one to suffer.
Okay. Well,
No, we can do the budget stuff now. It's
You
fine.
also have the investment policy statement, I don't know if that's something,
Yeah.
the investment policy report, that you need to, well, he's gonna be here for the budget anyway, so it doesn't.
Yeah, he's got that, and he's got the,
For pound and for pound, right?
yeah, the investment report. Do you want to do that?
How long, I mean,
Then we can let Paul go?
sure.
Wow, you got elevated.
Yeah, so which, do you want to go into the budget presentation now, or go into his quarterly investment report? Doesn't really matter, does it?
We can do the budget. Excuse me.
If I can make one comment about the OPEB. When we had our first actuarial report, our unfunded liability was close to 40 million. And today, it's about 28 million. So it's actually come down all those years.
Yeah.
Not necessarily because of our funding, but just of actions that have been taken. Whether it's the change in the, the prescription drug subsidies and things of that nature, privatizing school lunch, the custodial. Inflationary factors have not been as high as they've been actuarially determined once the actuarial studies were done. And we've had some change in demographics where we have a slightly younger workforce now than we did too. So all those factors, kind of chipped away. And even though we only have roughly at this point in time a little under $1 million in the trust fund now, it's dropped about $12 million, or about almost 25%.
Yeah.
So congratulations, that's really great, because I know a lot of that's Scantic Valley. We're
Going in
really
the right
thrilled.
direction.
Yeah.
Well, if I may, I think, I was gonna refrain from comment, but in the midst of all the doom and gloom, it is a good reminder that it's an actuarial deficit, not an actual deficit.
Right.
Whereas, Paul made the analogy to infrastructure. That is true. It's something that we have out there facing us that we know we're going to need to spend taxpayer money on at some point in time, or make a decision that we just want to let decay set in, either economically or from an infrastructure standpoint. But you can't redefine a collapsed inlet. It is what it is. But changes in definitions to the promises that were made, how they're measured, how they're defined, any of those things can be made that, as you just outlined, substantially alter the number out there. And that's, so we do try and approach it with hiring decisions in real time, balancing the desire to reduce that obligation with the need to provide the highest quality services and attract and retain highly qualified employees to serve the town. So when you talk about the cost of employees, if we drop salaries, to offset that number, we're not going to get we're not going to get good, talented people to come work here, and that's the thing. You know, and it is virtually on an employee by employee and position by position basis that we evaluate it. If there's opportunities to make a position part-time and not have it benefited, we do that. So that's how we were trying to, from a management standpoint, that's how we're trying to get at the issue. But it's,
It's going to take a change in the whole philosophy from the state level on how they have their employees.
yeah, I mean, to some extent, that's the extent to which we can address the issue at the local level.
You're fairly limited. The only thing about the drop-in list, they can't all get together and sue us for not
That's
taking
right.
care of them at the end of the road, but the employees can.
They are easier to ignore than employees.
Yeah,
That's
they're a
true.
lot easier. You put a
That's
steel
true.
plate over them, forget about them.
There was legislation 2 years ago, as you folks know. I'm sure it's going to be resurrected, if not with the new budget, very shortly thereafter. Again, there was a committee put together, and one of the biggest recommendations was to not have the full benefit after 10 years of credit service retirement, but 20 years and prorated in between.
out.
I don't know the impact of that, but I'm sure it's only going to be a favorable impact on our OPEB liability in that particular case. So that's probably the biggest nut coming up to crack in order to have our liability come down even further.
And that will have a significant impact.
But when you're talking about this, I mean, if you look at the total reserves that the town has, and the OPEB is defined just for OPEB, and we have stabilization funds and so forth, and those numbers were nowhere near where they are today.
No, they're
I mean, they were,
They're highest.
in 10 years ago, we didn't have 5 to 7% of our budget in reserve funds, and I think it was, so my only point is, if it wasn't an OPEB, it might be an operation stabilization, either which of those funds could be used to offset a
Be used for anything,
OPEB
sure.
liability.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that we're missing too, is the focus, I think Mark, I don't know, in the discussion 3 years ago, we talked about OPEB being a certain percent of the budget. Well, 20 years from now, that, we're talking about a $50 million budget, 20 years from now, it could be a $150 million budget, or a $100 million budget, and that percentage is still gonna be 2% of the budget. So even though that number's gonna grow, so is the budget. And to Stephen, you mentioned the doom and gloom, and that's all OPEB has ever brought to the town is doom and gloom. And I think that if you take a step back and say we're financially much better off than we were 10 years ago, whether it's through OPEB or reserves, then I don't think as a total reflection of our budget, it's not this insurmountable task either. So
Well-
to start cutting up the budget in terms of employees, and to your point of, that you start saying, well, we're gonna take a $50,000 employee and make it 40 because of OPEB. I don't know what the end result will be, but I'm sure it's not gonna be for the benefit and the long-term benefit of the town.
They just changed the retirement system, is what they're after, to where they're funding more of their own system. I mean, that's what the government did, and that's what some of the states have already done. That's a shift we're hoping to see taken, delay the benefits to 20 years instead of 10, so to be those, I don't think, you're not gonna get any cheaper employees going forward.
I mean, increased retirement age,
Yeah.
increased years of service,
Right.
increased employee contributions, all those things can add up. And sorry, but the only thing I'll say is, I know many people hadn't even heard of OPEB, but wasn't it a change in GASB rules?
No,
Where-
those haven't come yet.
It really came to the forefront because it started to enter our financial statements about 5 years ago. So yes, it was a GASB pronouncement that came out probably about 7 years ago with, such and such a time this is going to take place. And for us, the time, well, for all the municipalities in Massachusetts, it's about 5 years in. And what happens is our accrued liability, what Tom said was about $2 million a year, the difference between the ARC and what we're funding, that goes on our balance sheet and doesn't make our balance sheet look any favorable because the only thing we're putting on there is on a liability. There's no asset to go along with it like you would if you built this school. You'd have an asset of $78 million even though you have a bonds payable amount.
Sorry.
I think there's a misstatement, and that is, we're not looking at 2% for the next 20, 30 years of the budget growing. Your problem is you're seeing it going from 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because you start out and you might have, let's say, 500 retirees. Well, next year, every year it's going to grow, and there's no way this town will be able to support. Right now, we're at 900 employees. So eventually, there's going to be double the employees, the retirees of the employees, and that is going to be a cost that will grow and grow and grow. And so we have to realize that just how health insurance in the state's realizing it's going to eat the whole budget. And it's now over 33%, and it's still growing, and that's where the deficit's coming for this year. This is something that's not just an actuary number. These are people, and these are people living longer years, and the health insurance increasing. I think what you did in Scantic Valley was incredibly valuable into deciding how you are restructuring the health insurance. If we can change when they're eligible by the state, that would be great. But I think it's going to take a lot of different elements to keep us afloat on this, because we don't want to put $2.2 million aside every year.
Let's move forward with that. You want to start with your presentation?
On the budget?
Yeah.
I thought it was Stephen's presentation.
Stephen, you
Sure.
want to do it?
Sure.
Good weasel, Paul.
Yeah, that's what I get for like moving the agenda to let him go early.
Yeah. He threw you under the bus pretty quick,
I
didn't
don't see. Did you guys? Did you receive the spreadsheet? It's not in my packet. The spreadsheet with the.
No.
I should have been. Sorry.
Do you have this?
No.
No, they don't have that. I mean, they have an original version that has changed.
Okay.
I mean, I think the intent tonight was to go through the budget message and look at the overall budget spreadsheet, which I thought was in the packet. I think.
Well, do they have it? Subcommittee
What's that?
has it? Does the
Yes.
and does Richard have it? So
No.
it's just me? Richard doesn't. Okay,
No, I
I
don't
thought it
have
might
it.
have just been me.
I think to talk about the FY16 budget, I don't want to bury the lead, and that is that the budget as presented is balanced without the use of reserves. We have about $75,000 in free cash remaining from FY15.
15 certified numbers.
Certified last fall.
Right.
We have about 75,000 remaining, and we are projecting additional free cash next fall as well, or this coming fall as well. We do not use a single dollar of it to achieve a balanced budget, and that's something that we've worked hard to kind of cement as a policy of not using free cash for operational expenses. The board did, as we just discussed, the board did adopt two policies: the capital improvement policy and the OPEB liability policy that directly impacted funds available for the rest of operations of the town government, because it called for higher percentages for both capital spending as well as contributions to the OPEB trust fund. I would add to that on the school side, they are projecting higher personnel costs as well as higher utility costs, predominantly in gas and electric. So there were a lot of stressors. If you recall, we had that joint meeting in the fall where we laid out the stresses to the budget, where we were projecting a slight deficit. We worked very closely. When I say we, the town administration, the leaders of the school and select board, school committee and select board, communicated a lot over the past few months to make sure we understood where we were coming from, and worked to find creative solutions to be able to jointly and in a unified way present this budget that is balanced, does comply with the OPEB and capital policy, meets the needs of the town and the schools, and does so in a responsible way. So I can go through some of the really, and I don't mean to be glib when I say this. It really is a low or no drama budget. Base level is the terminology we use in our Government Finance Officers Association GFOA budgeting best practices, and I would say this is the definition of a base level budget. It does project increasing taxes up to the 2.5% levy cap. There are, as you can see, I know you can't see unfortunately, but if you look at some of the specific sections in the budget message, there are certain areas of government where we have actually reduced cost. And there are certain areas of government where costs have gone up. And when you look at if you looked at the operating budget actually goes up less than 2%. It is the additional contributions to OPEB and capital that get us, I think, and a few other things that really get us to that 2.5% cap. So like we did last year when we essentially did the same thing and presented a balanced budget without the use of reserves and in conjunction with the school district. We went line by line, challenged department heads on their expenditures that weren't consistent with the items being budgeted. We reviewed positions, and if a position had been vacant and didn't seem to be needed to the core functioning of the department, we would eliminate it. And like I said, as I said when I interviewed, budgeting is an everyday thing. And so as turnover occurred, we did do those evaluations of, can we convert this to a part-time position? Can we outsource the function? Is the function outsourced now, and to provide a higher level of service, it should then be a town function? Like I said, those conversations happen daily. So we have spent some time talking about this to the subcommittee, and I guess, I at the risk of kind of reading through the budget message, I didn't know if the board had a chance to review it. I would either defer to the subcommittee or open it for questions or turn it over to Paul for additional thoughts.
Yeah, I would just add, Stephen did mention that the tax levy, we do use the maximum amount that is estimated for next year. The other sources of revenue being state aid, we are using a level funded state aid amount. That budget, I believe, the governor's budget comes out on Wednesday, and we'll know how accurate our projection is to a certain degree at that point in time. The governor's number is not a final number, but we're hoping that it's a good starting point. And with regard to local receipts, the third, biggest component of where our money comes from, we've added a few areas of local receipts. The biggest factor that we added was about $50-something thousand to the motor vehicle excise. And that amount was based upon the fact that our first commitment in FY15 was $54,000 higher than it was its predecessor a year ago. The receipts are on target. We do believe that even this year we'll have met the budget, and when it comes to motor vehicle excise, and go over. So we thought that was going to be an ongoing revenue source. The other area that we made some increases in our estimate in the revenue was interest income. Right now, for FY15, we have already met our FY15 projection for interest income. And again, I made this statement before, and I can make it later again when we go over the investment part of it. It's not because we're getting greater interest amounts. It's because we have more cash in our pockets right now. I looked at the investment report that you have before you. I believe there's $16 million that we currently have today. If you looked at that same report a year ago, it was down to about $12 million. So we have $4 million more. Main sources are that is we're not internally funding the high school project, the final expenses of the high school project, and we did get roughly $2 million reimbursement over the last 9 months on the storm damage that came in over the last, like I said, bigger chunk came in last April. We had another chunk that came in October. So that's some, and the other thing too is we got the $850,000 from MGM. So our cash is more plentiful, and that's the main reason why we have a greater amount of interest coming in. Stephen did mention some of those percentages. The general fund budget goes up by less than 2%, 1.97. And when you do all the budgetary funds, meaning include the solid waste enterprise, the water, and the sewer fund, the bottom line of the operating budget goes up 1.3%. So, to that degree, those numbers, to me, look very favorable, balanced budget. We have a projection for next year's free cash already of $1 million plus. We don't have to use any of that for balancing the operating budget. So, things look bright when it comes to the budgetary process moving forward, in the near future anyway.
I have no questions now, I'm just reading.
No, I can just comment, and then maybe
Yeah,
Paul
go
will,
ahead.
from the point of view of the Finance Subcommittee. We've looked through the budget, and I think Stephen's right. It's a low drama, no drama type budget. I think one of the concerns that I have and this is, we've talked about this, is that somehow Proposition 2.5, which was to set a ceiling on tax increases every year, seems to have ended up over the years of setting a floor on tax increases every year, and how do we get away from that concept where everybody's afraid to leave unallocated tax revenue with the thought that, well, if we don't spend it, somebody else will spend it, or, residents on the town floor will come grab it or ask for it or whatever it is. And I think that it's a real potential issue that, that this budget, which is a no-drama budget, if this were a drama year, we could probably wring this thing a little bit. Now, I'm not suggesting we do, and I'm not saying that it would be desirable to do that, but, in the kind of, in a different mode of, a different kind of year, if we had to take money out of the budget, we would. So, I guess my question is, and remember, one of the things that Stephen said is that we increased substantially the capital allocation this year over last year. We increased substantially the OPEB allocation this year over last year. And so there's it's a budget that does everything we want to do from a service point of view, everything we want to do from a capital point of view, everything we want to do from an OPEB point of view. You say, well, isn't that great? And the answer is, sure, it is great, but we are taxing people to the maximum allowable 2.5%.
Yes, Mary.
Well, that's something we decide back in November, when we set the tax rate, that we were going to go up 2.5%. So I don't think it's...
No. That was, in November, we decided the current rate. This is what we're doing for the next year. So nobody decided that we're going up now, it turns out that we built a budget that will go up 2.5% in FY16. That's the premise that we have. But what we did in December was set a tax rate based on the FY15 budget, which did the same thing. And oh, by the way, we did it in 14 and 13
We did it
and
every
12.
single year. We've gone up 2.5%. So I think that when you sit and we look at these budgets, I think the discussion has to start occurring before that, rather than to say, well, this is good, but it's doing it within the 2.5%, because that's always what this board has always brought forward, is the 2.5%. And why are we doing that? Well, there's the issue of the infrastructure and the other needs we're talking about in town. And so I think that we have said every year we've gone up 2.5%. There's been no discussion on this board not going up 2.5%, and so this budget's done what it needs to. So I'm pleased that you stayed within the 2.5%, and we're funding the service. If this board decides they want to make a change in that, that's something we have to start having discussion in the future.
And clearly, Marie, you're right. I mean, we could have found ourselves in a position where, to get the things we needed to do, we couldn't do it within 2.5%, and then we'd have had some tougher choices to make. My only point is that the politically incorrect thing to say here, but there seems to be a perception of a money grab in town, that if I don't use the levy limit, somebody else will. And so, ultimately, you've got 3 or 4 places looking for the money. You've got citizens looking for the money. You've got different departments looking for the money, and it's just a fact of life that's what's happening. It's not condemning anybody, it's just a fact of life. Over the last, 8 or 10 or 12 years, the budget's gone up every year, taxes have gone up every year by 2.5%. And I guess the question is, short of a revaluation that may give us relief, we may be coming up against a situation where we hit our levy limit of 2.5% of real property value in this town as our tax rate gets to $25. And should that ever happen, we're going to have a different discussion.
Right. And that's why I think there's been some discussion, and I think we do need to sit down, look at some long-term financial planning on what we're going to do, because we can't keep raising at 2.5%. Like you said, we're going to reach the levy limit, and also it's very expensive with the highest rate but But if you raise it, it will be spent. I think that's the bottom line. If you raise it, it will be spent.
Clearly.
There's always place to spend the money. But when it comes to this specific budget, we raised the 2.5%. This is where we're going with it. We haven't told them to bring in a 2% budget. And so I'd
And
like.
remember, Marie, this isn't a year when general government unions, through our negotiations, through their concessions, we have a generally 0% increase in wages for the general government unions this year. Had that not been negotiated, and it was, I'll, pat ourselves on the back to the people at home, it was a conscious decision by the select board during negotiations over the last several years to bring all those forces together. So this year we would have a 0% wage increase. So that's one of the reasons that's happened. But had that not happened, we'd have had different choices this year.
Well, I think I want to just follow on this one. There's been a lot of different choices. I think when you guys came to us in the beginning of the year and told us what the pressures were, this was not no drama didn't mean no work. There was some hard work to get this to 0, and I know that we were holding our breath on where the health insurance was going to come in. If they come in 150, we would not come in with a no drama. So what we're hearing now, which I guess we'll now get the presentation, that's a lot of work that's gone into that, and I understand that. Even when you go 2.5% each year, that's not easy to do to get where we are, plus hit the capital. So
And we will get this presentation.
we will get the presentation before we start, go back into it. So thank you,
Ready for
Richard.
the presentation? Any other comments before they start? I'm gonna move out, so
This is an overview. This is a version of basically what we gave to town meeting last year, which is we focused on the image of the pie, and I think that's important because the size of the pie, which represents the amount of money we have to spend, only expands by essentially 2.5% each year. And I think with some of the costs, with some of the new costs we had this year, again, related to the policies as well as personnel and utility costs, our retirement assessment from Hampden County went up substantially. I appreciate that, Marie. It was not no work. We had to put a lot of work in and really work with the school department and the school committee, who should be commended for working with the town on making sure that we were able to present this budget unified and not enter town and not present something that was setting up for one of these town versus school conflicts. And this, like I said, I think I'm pleased that we were able to do that two consecutive years. The one thing I'll say about Prop 2.5 and raising taxes 2.5% every year, I think we would love to not have to do that. I think what makes Long Meadow kind of stuck is that our new growth number is traditionally very low because we are built out and we are predominantly single-family residential homes. And so some communities that are able to not tax to the levy cap are able to do that because they may have, a new manufacturing facility or shopping mall come online that adds, hundreds of thousands of dollars into their base, into their general funds that we just don't get that. And we carry about $125,000 each year. And so I think in addition to financial planning, I think it's probably time to start looking at the 2004 master plan again, because truthfully, other than shedding services, the relief we're going to get from our hitting that cap is by getting more value out of the land that we have, because that's how our system is based. You get your money out of the assessed value of your property. So I won't belabor that point anymore. So I'll just go through some of these slides fairly quickly. So this is basically the overall town manager recommended budget by function. And the pie here shows visually what percentage is taken up by each function. The schools obviously are the majority of the budget. I think that percentage is down slightly from last year. Could be wrong about that, but it's about the same. I mean, many of these categories did not move a whole lot from last year to this year. As you can see, some of the percentage increases are fairly small.
Those are percentages of the budget.
Oh, sorry, percentages of the budget. Right. So then this previous slide's by function, so schools, public works, employee benefits, general government, those things. And each of these functions has a narrative associated with it in your budget message. And then this is by category, so all functions lumped together for things like expenses, debt service, employee benefits, and then salaries. And as you can see, salaries and benefits are almost 3/4 of the budget. And I know in some ways that can seem like a lot, but we are really a people industry. Our raw material as well as our final product are people, the employees that provide the services, that teach our children, that plow our streets. So for the general government budget, and this is basically town manager select board budget, the finance department, which includes the town clerk, the treasurer collector, so base operations. That is, as you can see, we're proposing almost $8,000 less than we budgeted for general government last year. I do want to commend the finance director. A substantial portion of that savings comes from turnover we had and hiring and wage negotiations that we were able to do in the treasurer collector's office as well as a few other places. Again, to that point that's how we try and mitigate our overall liability for the future. Again, though, still providing base level services, high quality base level services to the public. There is a small reduction in the reserve fund from $60,000 to $50,000. As you know, the reserve fund is administered by the finance committee. They haven't really used it all that much, and it's for unforeseen circumstances, so the fact that they don't use it is a good thing, but we wanted to tie up slightly less of our levy, to have it kind of parked on the sidelines, so that went to $50,000. The increase in legal services is a small $4,000 recommended increase for town council. The retainer has not been raised in, I think, 6 or 7 years, and he requested an increase in that amount because the cost to provide the legal services through his firm aren't, I don't even think, even closely covered by the retainer. So public safety, and I didn't lump together everything. I split out to the police and fire department budgets only because a $4 or almost $5 million number for public safety is large, but it really breaks down about evenly. Well, not quite evenly, but it does break down 2.7 for the police department and $2 million for the fire department. Again, a very small increase, $43,000 increase for the police. Mainly administrative things, basically expense items. And then the fire department is, again, a very small increase in steps only. The collective bargaining agreement does expire at the end of June. The fire department, the firefighters union has not initiated negotiations. So we are kind of in a wait-and-see mode on that. Planning and community development. This is a department where it's a very small budget, but we did decrease it for about $1,600. Again, most of that's expense items, and we did extend that 0% cost of living increase to non-union personnel on the town side as well. One policy factor in here is that we currently have 2 contracted inspectors, our plumbing and electrical inspector, and our proposal is to make them part-time, non-benefited town employees to mitigate some procurement issues associated with having the contracted service, as well as be able to have greater access to them during the day for help with questions and things like that. And I do have some more detailed information I could present at an upcoming budget meeting. So the schools, the overall general fund increase is 2.3%. That is about $39,000 less than the school committee recommendation, which is basically the remaining amount we needed to balance the budget and maintain the town's base level services as well as the schools. As I noted, they have increased utility and personnel costs that are covered under their budget. And they did reduce full kindergarten tuition, I think, by about $250, which I think is about 10% of the tuition. This is the Public Works budget. So a small $23,000 increase on a $3.5 million budget. A lot of that is the continuation of the reallocation of DPW employee time. We talked about that last year. It's somewhat of a complicated issue. The time is split between work on enterprise fund issues, water and sewer projects, things like that, as well as general fund issues like street maintenance and repairs. But the same human beings do much of it. And I should say time is also split out for snow and ice removal for plowing. So we track all of that separately, but it's still the same guys that do it. And so they have been tracking their time, and in past years it was done based on an assumed level of activity, and now we've gotten a lot more specific. And that's good, but it does hurt the general fund, in that the costs that had been carried by the enterprise fund are now carried by the general fund. So that speaks to that increase. And then we do have a proposal for a full-time custodian at Greenwood, focused on Greenwood, not exclusively. The level of service that we've gotten from the now third contracted custodial company has not been satisfactory at Greenwood. It is, it's not a back office place. We on the daycare side, we charge people to be there, and children lay on the floors and play and use the facilities. And then of course the other side of the building is our senior center, which we want to create a welcoming environment for seniors to come utilize our center and enjoy the many programs we offer. The bulk of the complaints about our custodial service have been generated by Greenwood, and it's the large reason why we've switched companies 3 times since I've been here, less than 2 years. We could keep going through the carousel of contracted custodial companies, or we could just decided to make the recommendation to have somebody who's a town employee and accountable and there, not during the day necessarily, but earlier than the custodial company. There are times where people have accidents or there's a need for custodial services before 7 or 8 p.m. when the contracted cleaner shows up. Something like the salary is offset by the reduction in the cost for the contract, but this is a recommendation that would have a slight increase to benefits and ultimately OPEB, but we feel that the need for consistent quality service is not being met by the contracted service. All other buildings would remain under contracted custodial services. So community services, overall, it's about a $20,000 decrease from last year. There is an increase in veterans benefits, largely due to increased caseload. There are also an increase in expenses for the veterans agent because of the VALRAC II requirements that the veterans agent is certified. There's coursework associated with that certification. There is an increase in the COA director salary through negotiation. We had to pay the director more than we were paying the previous director, but we spent a lot of time trying to recruit good candidates, and we've ended up with a great one, but we had to negotiate we had to pay a higher salary than we had been previously paying. Parks and Rec is reduced by about $42,000, and that again is the elimination of 2 vacant daycare positions. That's largely due to declining enrollment in the daycare. As you know, we've spent a lot of time looking at daycare the operations and finances of the daycare, and this move is a furtherance of that analysis. Employee benefits and liability property insurance. It's a substantial increase. It's a $7.7 million budget. It's a $490,000 increase. Again, and largely through Paul's work at Scandic Valley, we were able to achieve a 0% increase in health insurance premiums. However, we do have a substantial increase in the Hampden County Retirement Board assessment. Part of that is just, I think, system-wide assessment increases, but then part of it is the finalization of the police supervisor's contract, which was not done when we received our assessment for FY15. And then, of course, the increased contribution to our OPEB trust fund is included in that $490,000. So it's a $119,000 increase on top of what we had already been paying. So debt service, we're paying about $3.9 million in debt service. That's again, the overall amount of debt service is going down, and much of that is subject to overrides that were previously passed by the town. Excluded debt, no, I have that backwards, don't I?
Right.
Yes.
The excluded debt is going up slightly. The decrease in debt service is mainly, I was rolling over bands, 5-year bands, you may recall, it was kind of my program because the interest rates were so cheap. Basically, we were going out to bid for a bond in a couple weeks, and the big project where we have $940,000 for 4 drainage projects, we took it off the 5-year plan and put it on it. We built it into the bond that we're going out for, taking it out over 10 years. That was the biggest reason for the decrease in the overall debt.
Thank you. I was going good too. So this is a comparison FY15 to FY16 on the operating budget side. Again, it doesn't, the OPEB and the capital policy stuff aren't well, the OPEB is in there, but the capital is, the additional funding in capital is not in there. But as you can see, the percentage increase on the general fund is less than 2%. And the grand total, when you include the enterprise funds, when you include the enterprise funds, it's a modest 1.3% variance from FY15. So this slide is kind of a placeholder for capital. As you know, I do prepare a more detailed capital improvement plan presentation. As we know at the beginning of the meeting, I'm awaiting a report from the Capital Planning Committee to finalize that presentation. But this gives you a snapshot. We received, I presented my recommended plan. The town manager's recommended FY16 capital plan, and I recommended about $3.4 million in projects, about $1.4 million in road, sidewalks, drain, street projects, about $661,000 facilities, $470 in equipment purchases, and then $827,000 in water and sewer enterprise fund projects. The sources that we have to offset those costs are general fund, Chapter 90 funding, obviously enterprise funds, Community Preservation Act. There's a project that's recommended that would be covered by FEMA, and then a small amount of ambulance funds for a vehicle purchase. So that's the questions, comments. I can go back to a slide.
Go ahead.
Oh, I just want to say, I was happy to see that you increased the building maintenance line under the DPW. Does that just employee hours, or is there training involved in that?
A lot of that is actually contracted expenses, especially for this building. A lot of the things, the work that we had done on the building had been covered either by warranty or were part of the general contract. As I mentioned at the outset, we have settled all of that work and paid Gilbane their final payment. So now we transition to contracted maintenance for a lot of the more technical things like the building management system. A lot of this is a very, very high-tech building, and so a lot of these subcontractors for Gilbane that developed the building systems, we've retained as contractors to help maintain the building.
Ooh, so it's not really looking towards maintaining our other buildings or assets or training for maintenance? That's all being eaten by this building?
No, I wouldn't say it's all being eaten by this building, but a good chunk of it is.
Well, I hope in the future we look towards building that maintenance line item a little bit more and look at training and things like that, because there's, one of the reasons we're in this expensive building is we didn't really look at maintenance over the years. Thank you.
The overall increase in the capital policy, I think will go a long way to helping that.
Okay.
How about the subcommittee? What kind of questions did you guys have when this was going together?
Oh, you want to start, or you want me?
I'd rather, we have a meeting on the 9th. We have a meeting actually Wednesday night that we got some questions that we're going to bring up, and I'd like to hold them either for that Thursday or Monday meeting.
Okay. Thank you, Stephen.
Okay.
It was his budget. It was his presentation.
Yeah.
I think it may be worthwhile, though, of not only distributing the PowerPoint, Stephen, but also the budget details to the rest of the,
Yeah, I honestly thought they were in the packet. I apologize.
No, you didn't. You're just keeping us in the dark. I know what you're doing. Yeah, I have the budget detail, I believe, but I don't have the
Yeah, there's a couple pages of numerics, kind of a summary, and then the line item detail.
Okay.
We'll get the data.
I got one that says draft on it.
Most of the documents do say draft. Yeah, and that will likely say draft until it gets published in the warrant or in the GFOA, because
Okay.
as you can see, I kept the FY 2015 title at the beginning of it. That's why it says draft, because I'm discovering stuff like that all the time. And the board may make a decision to make a change to a number here or there, make a policy change, and we don't want, if someone else got a copy of this and it didn't say draft, I wouldn't want you to think it was the
Right.
final budget message.
I'm
So,
just kidding.
okay,
It's just lightening up the mood.
take this very seriously.
Yeah, I can tell that. Very serious. Okay, when you got I guess, Paul, you're gonna do the quarterly investment report?
Quarterly investment report. Yes, I can just grab it off the top here. Very quickly, there's not really anything extraordinary about this last quarter that transpired. We are in compliance with the main policy guidelines of our investment and cash policy, which include we have no long-term investments that exceed 5 years. We have no bank balance within an individual bank of $5 million or more. All our funds are fully insured and secured, and all the banking institutions that we are using are the highest rating of green by an outfit called VeraBank, which does the ranking on the banks. We did renew a CD that we have in the OPEB trust fund. That's a 13-month CD. We were able to achieve a rate of 0.80%. It doesn't sound like much, but I will say that it's 5 basis points higher than it was in the previous time, if there's any positive to be spun about that. You may recall in December, we did we did a ban that we had. We rolled over a ban, and some of that ban is going to be paid off. We are going out to bid March 12th with a $1.5 million bond, actually. The main component of that bond is it's about 700 and some odd thousand of that drainage project. $440,000 is for the Edgewood and Inglewood water main project, and we have a few other small water projects that are being built into that. Primrose is one of them that has about $80,000 left on its outstanding amount, and the Forest Glen Pump Station is the other amount that comprises the components of that bond, I should say. We had our meeting with Moody's last week. You will get the Moody's report tomorrow. Kind of keep our fingers crossed. They were looking for amounts, a little bit higher reserve amounts, something that, Tom Scanlon Jr. had alluded to. And we'll see what the outcome of those comments with Moody's, how they come out tomorrow morning. Again, as I said before, our interest that we're getting as far as revenue this year has already exceeded the budget projection. We only received about $45,000 last fiscal year. The FY15 budget for interest was based upon that actual of prior year. It was about $45,000. We've already exceeded to the tune of, I believe, we have $50,000 in interest that we received already this fiscal year. And again, it's the interest rates are not doing us any help. It's mainly the money that we have in the bank. As I alluded to earlier, we currently have $16,700,000, or as of December 31st. A year ago, that number was $12,177,000. So again, those key components being our reimbursement on the storm damage of about $2 million, the internal financing that we're no longer doing on this LHS project. I actually pushed the buttons for the final submittal to the school building committee today, so that will move forward. I don't know exactly when it'll be all completed. Hopefully, it's still in the early summer that all that is wound up. And again, we got the $850,000 from MGM, which is kind of sitting there at this point in time collecting interest also. So from a cash position, we're doing very well. Again, the biggest happening will be on March 12th. Hopefully, we will get a favorable interest rate. I'm pretty sure we will get a favorable interest rate when it comes to that bond issue. And after that, we'll probably be looking to do some financing potentially. This board will have to make a decision if this LHS project does come in at the estimated $500,000 additional that the town has to put in towards this project. And we'll see what other bonding projects, or if there are any other bonding projects that come out of the annual town meeting with the recommendations of the capital planning committee and your group here.
CFO, you should be able to take that out of petty cash.
I'm going to have to make an increase in my petty cash request, apparently. Or I'm going to have to fertilize my money tree in my office.
Or a little both. Thank you. Any questions? Right.
On that Moody's conversation, you said it was a little low on our balances. How much were they looking for? Another $500,000 or $1 million?
They didn't specifically make a statement of an amount.
Mm-hmm.
What they made a statement of is that comparable AA2 rated communities have fund balances that are increasing, and that ours are not increasing. And we argued the point, we made 2 points kind of, well, if theirs are increasing, are they getting to the level of a AA3? Or the next higher level?
Yeah.
And we pointed out the fact that we spent over $2 million of our funds, of our reserves, to fund the October of 2011 storm damage. And for us to have reserves of a near identical amount of where we were 2 years ago, you can, if you divide it by 3, that's $700,000 a year that we were able to put back into our reserves, which is a fairly substantial amount. But that was the point. I don't know if the gentleman was trying to just prepare us for something, or I think he was more trying to prepare us for what his committee was going to be asking about. He does, the analyst has to go before a committee and make all these statements. And I imagine he has experience that when he sees this type of reserves maybe leveling off and not increasing, that the other committee members do have those concerns about that. Again, they look at numerous other factors. The reserves are just one. They talk about the community, its ability to pay, our favorable Proposition 2.5 votes. The other thing too, we talked about taxes and how the citizenry here has come up to the plate and funded, the large tax increases for the high school. I just tried to make that point that when it comes to the ability to pay, Long Meadow is not shying away from it. Our reserves may not be to the fact that where they would like to see them, but given the fact that we had the storm, the tax rate increase for this, I think we're doing pretty well overall.
But we should be looking to increase what we put into our operational stabilization fund?
Well, it's a combination of the operational stabilization fund and free cash.
Okay.
It was surprising that when we did do some of this talking, that it almost felt like the $250,000 that we moved into the OPEB trust fund in the fall, we would have been better off leaving it in free cash from an analysis standpoint of view, from their Moody's, So what that tells me in a year from now is, don't do it in the fall, do it in the spring, or do it right after you have the Moody's rating almost. And, if we had that other $250,000, it would have had some favorable impact, but they weren't all that big on the OPEB trust fund. They said it's probably going to come up in a few years, that it's going to have more impact, but surprisingly enough, it was kind of put on the back burner, and we didn't get brownie points for putting it into the OPEB trust fund almost. I don't want to say we're almost penalized, but the comment was made that, we're still looking at your free cash and your operational stabilization fund more than we're looking at the OPEB trust fund.
But now we're at 7%, is what you were saying, and I know that the goal is getting closer to 10. Is that sort of like our
right?
aim?
I had about 6.7. Maybe Tom had rounded it off from where we were at July 1st. because that's where we take the snapshot. That's when free cash is certified. Take the snapshot at that point in time. And you know, that amount, the 5 to 10% that we have in our policy actually came from a Standard & Poor's rating and not a Moody's. So I don't know if there's a difference between the two or not, but they would like to see it increase. They didn't give us a target number, but, you know, I'm sure they'd like to see it up 1% or so. And, you know, again, if I look forward and you look forward at the end of this fiscal year, again, we did not use any money to balance the budget.
Right.
And when we looked at our reserves, what did we do? Where did we spend our money? We put $700,000 into stabilization fund. Not a problem. We put $250,000 to OPEB. You know, not an operational factor, money put aside for future obligations. Another $250,000 went for capital projects. Basically went for the DPW study. And then $400,000 for another capital project, for a fire truck. So, you know, these were not monies that were just willy-nilly put aside for operational standpoints. They're real, you know, capital needs that we had. And it just seems like we were penalized, and I don't understand kind of where they were coming from with that. You know, again, I guess timing-wise, we're almost better the next time around, if there's a projected bond issue to go out, to almost postpone some of these large ticket items until after we meet with Moody's, just to get their favorable vote. I mean, I probably shouldn't say it too loud, because I'm sure they're listening somewhere, but, you know, I mean, we almost got penalized for that, and I just felt that was unfair.
I will say, if I may, our financial advisor did try to vigorously defend the town's financial management practices, not only this past year, but traditionally. And, you know, the comment was made when the gentleman from Moody's made the comment that your fund balances have been stable, they haven't really increased. The comment was made, well, if you have another town that you know of that has very little new growth, absorbs the full impact, not the full, but absorbs a substantial impact from a costly and devastating weather event, and then builds a high school, and doesn't draw down, you know, and was still able to increase their fund balances. I mean, I think to me the triumph is that we were able to keep the fund balances stable in light of all those factors, and keep the town, you know, operating well. And I agree with Paul. I feel like they were really looking at kind of a factor without looking at, you know, the causality. And we tried to highlight some of the specifics sort of beneath this, you know, factor that they would say is a consideration, and say, well, that may be on its face something, but here's the detailed reasons why you should really rethink your position on that. So I think we did well. The folks on the call, I think, did well to represent the town's management in terms of the town, how well the town is managed and has been managed for many years. And represent our position in terms of why we believe that we are AA2 or better.
Right. We also sent them basically there were 4 policies that this committee had come up with: the general reserve policy, the capital improvement policy, the debt policy, and the OPEB policy changes. Those were also sent to them and pointed out to them, and, you know, kind of a pat on the back, but we'll see what impact they have. I mean, they did say they look good, but we'll be able to see when the proof is in the pudding tomorrow.
Any other questions? Paul?
A couple. One is a statement, one's a question. One question is, why is Moody's in that Standard & Poor's? Just so, because I know, you know, they're the most, there's other rating agencies besides those two, but.
I don't have a reason, Paul. It's just been tradition more than anything. And you know what? If things don't come out favorably with Moody's this time, it could very well be their last time.
Okay. And the statement part of it is that I understand what you're saying, and everybody has said regarding what our cash positions are and the storm and so forth, but I think, I don't know if it was you or Stephen used the word causality, but I think the causality is, when we take a look at it, is, you know, at some point in time, there has to be a check on spending as well. And, you know, you listed projects, and you can substitute whatever project you want this year, last year, the year before. and I'm not going to beat on the drum of we've exceeded 4% on capital projects in the last 4 or 5 years, but sometimes the spending does have, is part of that cause and has an effect. And hopefully the call comes out in a positive tomorrow and not a negative, because if it comes in a negative manner, it's going to cost the town more money in bonding and
It will cost us
potentially.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it will cost us something. It'd be hard to determine exactly what, because we'll never know exactly, but we can get that estimate from our estimated advisor, and we can do the math and see, if it was 5 basis points, 10 basis points, we can do the math and find out, try to quantify that.
Any other questions for Paul? Great job, guys. Nice presentation.
I was just wondering if there was any questions on the management letter in the audit correction report, or, we didn't really get into the details of that, and I didn't know if anybody had any issues with that.
Now, the only question I have is, Mark asked the question about the audit committee going to the school committee to talk about the particular items that pertain to their budget and the practices there. What are the issues there? Have they been solved, or are we all set with those, or?
No, I think the main issue that repeated itself in the management letter was the issue of gate receipts. When that issue was raised in the 2013 audit, there were no internal controls. There was no reconciliation. It was haphazard. At the end of the, let's say, the gate receipt cycle, it was almost by the end of, it was mid-basketball season, by the time that it was the audit, the FY13 audit management letter came out. It was addressed at that point in time, but you had lost all the football season, a little of the soccer where they do gates amount, and half of the basketball season. So really what happened is that after that, Tom Mazza got the folks together over there. He came up with a program. He came up with forms that they put together. People were to sign off on them, and the reconciliation was done. The audit in FY14, now there was a couple of football games that already transpired, so the auditors went over to check the reconciliation on those football games, and found that there were still some minor things that were happening as part of the reconciliation, signatures not being in place of who's signing off on it. I believe in the audit correction report that Tom Mazza addressed those as of October 14th, when they were brought to his attention, to that nature. But I think that's where, it had come up again as not being fully implemented at the time that the audit was being done, and there needed to be additional corrections made. And again, it was basically on the gate receipts.
And then I just have one more thing. In the time that we started doing the quarterly reports or updates, I know that over the years there was some disagreement or difference of opinions between our auditor and in our town in regards of how to, what constituted a fixed asset and things like that. And I mean, everything that has ever been addressed there seems to have, or brought up by the auditors, has been addressed. And I don't think we've gone 2 quarters or anything like that where something hasn't been rectified in some way.
Right.
And it's good to see that there's really, I think his words were, Tom Scanlon Sr., was that we have an unmodified opinion, which is the best that you can
Right.
get. So
Right.
I think that just shows that we have the controls in place.
Right.
Okay. I'd like to thank the Select Board Subcommittee on Financial Subcommittee. It's Mark Gold and Paul Santinello. I know you guys have had a lot of meetings, so it looks like it may be paying some benefits in the process. So thanks, guys. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
We had the item on here to close the annual town meeting warrant, and I noticed there's a lot of stuff still open on this. We don't have any of the capital filled in, or we haven't had a meeting with capital yet. So,
I didn't get that in my packet.
oh, no?
No.
Well, we can.
Did you get it?
Yeah, it's there, Marie. It's,
Yeah.
it's under new business warrant, 215 annual town meeting draft.
Yeah.
I saw it on the, but I didn't see it in the, oh, okay, I guess I just missed it when I was looking and printing out stuff.
I guess we can close it, but we're gonna have to reopen it to put the other stuff back in anyway, so
One question I have is on what's Article 23 right now, which is a citizen's petition. Is that legal? Meaning, have we given it to town council to review? No,
He's not reviewed any of this yet.
okay.
I'll be honest, it was my recommendation that they do that as an article. So if it's not legal, then the egg is all over my face.
Yeah.
And the reason why is that I know that in researching past articles, there have been amendments to previous articles in previous years. And since it was basically an extension of the existing, or they had appropriation left over, it seemed to make more sense to do it that way. I don't know if Paul has any guidance on this, but I did not.
Okay.
So maybe I did talk to the town council about this, but
I thought you did.
I thought I did as well. But it could be. I think that's being consistent with what we've done in the past, because it is a remainder from the existing appropriation.
But technically, why I ask it's legal is because technically that money's not spent. By the time this rolls around, that money should be back in the, go back to free cash, whatever wasn't
Back in the
spent.
general fund.
Well, no, we wouldn't close that money out. You're referring to the last petition order?
Yeah.
Right.
That money wouldn't normally get closed out until June 30th. So we're having this meeting in May. If that money is available, they can use it as an available fund.
But even though it was allocated in May of
No,
last
May
year.
of last year. It was allocated in May of last year, but they didn't get the job done by last June 30th, so the money was brought
Okay,
forward.
that's where I was getting at,
Yeah.
just because if there was no money left over, then there's nothing there.
Right, I appreciate clarifying.
Okay.
It's basically, they received the appropriation from town meeting last May, available, well, it's available right away because it's free cash.
Right.
We did the study, we fulfilled the scope of the original petition, which again was all citizens petition. We believe, the petitioners believe that additional work needs to be done that was outside the original scope, but they hadn't spent all their appropriation. So if town meeting approves this amendment to the previous article, they can spend the money on May 13th.
Okay, so then, I'm sorry, I'm going off on a tangent. You want to go? Okay.
Go ahead, Paul.
Because I think money aside, okay, because that's what I was just wondering. If there was no money there, if it went back to free cash, then how do you spend money that's no longer there? When we come down to this article, and it might have been a month ago, that's when we discussed this, before we had the presentation by the Council on Aging Board, or board members, what point in time, the citizens petition the citizens had a petition, like you said, the scope was fulfilled. Now, citizens want to come back and expand that scope, which, that's fine, because they can do that at town meeting, to include town property. At what point in time are we either crossing a line saying that citizens can look to build something on town property? Because that's really what the scope is the intent is to look at putting a council on aging building on Turner Park. And I get that, we had them in at a meeting and we went over that whole conversation. I'm not debating that point. But at what point, because that's where we know it's going, and if the citizens petition comes back and says, okay, Turner Park is now a suitable, or the most suitable, let's say, site, and this is what it would potentially cost, why does this continue to go down as a citizens petition because the Council on Aging Board has not asked the Select Board, for example, to say, take this project on as a town and go through this, because I think I wish Council on Aging was here and I would invite them in. I would ask that we invite them in, because we're going down a road, because this is clearly a Council on Aging initiative, and we know that there's no, and that's where, or that's some of the backing of it. But we're going down a road to where the study's gonna come out and say, this is where we want it. But there's been no movement on the town or the board to investigate whether Turner site is the best site, and I know that's what the study's gonna do. But at some point in time, we're gonna go like this, and we're gonna have a major issue where there's a citizen's petition that says Turner Park's the best park, there's gonna be another citizen's petition for an override or debt exclusion or whatever, and yet we're talking about a town-owned parcel of land. And I really would encourage that. I'm not saying that, this is on there, and perhaps they could pull it, but I would encourage a discussion with the Council on Aging Board about this issue, because it's either, I just don't want to see this come down to a year from now, where there's this massive debate that, yes, it's Turner Park, no, it's not Turner Park, and we didn't, and we're going to talk about the land behind the library when we don't own that land behind the library. Because and I think Alex may have said this, but, I think we've all said in a way, we need to vote on this, is to figure out, is this a priority and should this be up there? And I just, and I'm not pointing a finger here, I'm just saying, I think we need a further conversation with the Council on Aging Board, since it was their board chair and one of their representatives talking to us at the meeting. It wasn't on TV, unfortunately, folks, but about this. And I think we're going down, we're not even heading in the same direction on the same tracks. I think we're not even looking at the same thing. And I think that's going to be a shame for all the effort that's going to go into it, because it is taking town employees' times. I know that for certain aspects of this. And I just would hope that we could get in the same direction anyway.
Right.
When this petition article came up, there's been a lot of discussion on whether they really needed to go back to town meeting, on whether the scope of the work, the original article covered it. And I think out of respect for the possibility that this board and other members could believe that, well, we're really exceeding the scope by taking this extra step, they're going back to town meeting. Now, there was discussion on bringing this back and having this be a select board article and bringing it through the town, but it was decided that since the original article was citizens, that they would, this next step, they're not talking about any exceeding the 35, just going back so that everyone stays part of the conversation. And what is this information supposed to be gathering? It's supposed to be gathering on what the costs are on building or renovating in various sites. So it's getting more information, so when they do come in front of the board, in order to have a full discussion, they will have the information instead of saying, well, how can you say this unless you don't know this, unless you don't know that? So this is like doing some preliminary work based on the original article a year ago, and out of respect, they're going back to town meeting to have this, and then to bring this information. They came in front of us, I think, a couple of times already, and they are ready for another presentation, but they feel this information will be very important. So I think the process is still moving its way down the line. I don't think we can really say we're going to be at crossroads at any time soon, and I think they do want to have that discussion and input from the board. And that's why they've come here a couple of times to want to hear what's happening. But I think they have very thoughtfully moved forward on, do we need an article? If we do need the article, the discussion, should it be citizens? And this is still informational gathering. There's nothing that's being done on any town property at this point in time.
I want to, if I may, I just want to, in the meetings with the COA, I want to concur with what Marie just said. I was fully prepared to offer this as a warrant article for board consideration, but I just felt, and I proposed, this is what I communicated to the COA board, was amending a citizen's petition, original citizen's petition article through, a town-generated article just didn't seem to be consistent with past practice. So simply as a procedural matter, we felt citizen's petition was the truer way to go, if you will, on amending the original citizen's petition. Paul, to some extent, I agree with you in that at some point in time we are going to hit a junction where the board is going to be faced with a decision whether it's approving a warrant article or a policy decision on use of parkland or something like that. That day is coming. I think the PVPC report did a good job outlining many things, but it didn't, I don't think, give anybody enough information to really make a decision on those next steps. And that's all. And these studies may not either, but at least it gets us closer to the mark. So to answer your question, I agree with you. We are getting there. I'm hoping that this process will get us there faster, if you will, and more equipped to make a good decision.
And it's the wording of the article when you talk about looking at, and I'm not disagreeing with you. I was just hoping that we prevent, running into a brick wall, because when you're talking about the cost analysis of 2 sites, my question would be, does the Council on Aging or the petitioner own either of those 2 sites? I'm going to assume the answer is no. If those two sites are town property, and even if it's one of those sites is town property, has the town given permission to any board of petition or authority to look at the potential of that land being used for something? So, for example, if it's Turner Park, why would we ask residents to spend money on a piece of land that hasn't even been authorized to be used as a potential site for a council on aging? And I think that's where the crossroad has already happened, because regardless, and I don't know what the other site is. I don't know if it's the property behind the library or the existing site or whatever.
Existing site.
Okay. So the question is, out of those two pieces of property, for further analysis and architectural numbers and engineering numbers and so forth, have those two sites, I know what the original petition said, but have those two sites have we given authority for anybody to look at them for the possible building on it? So I think that's where the discussion is, and I'm not saying that this can't be done. I don't know if there's agreement on the board that there's two sites available to rebuild the Council on Aging Center. There might be one, there might be four. We haven't had that discussion about where the potential sites would be. And I think at the last meeting that we had with the couple people from the Council on Aging, and it might have been you, Rich, who asked the question, is there one site or two sites? And I don't know how many times you asked it, but I think you got the different answer. I think you got two every time you asked. But my only point is, I don't know if this is the right amount of money for that article. I don't know if it's too much, too little. And I also don't know if and again, it's a citizen's petition, so we can't stop it, and that's fine, let it go forward. But I think there's a way to go beyond that and say, get Council on Aging in here and have that discussion. We haven't even talked about the potential sites, because there could be four other ones if we really thought about potentially where to put one, but we haven't talked about it. That's all, and I'm just looking at avoiding.
They have looked for a dialogue. And I don't think we've ever provided them a dialogue. We've had them before us twice, but we didn't seem to present too many questions to them. But I know the meetings I've been at, they're not trying to run. They're hoping to obtain a dialogue. And I think this will bring the final dialogue to flourishing, because it's a continuation of the original citizen petition. And I don't know how many sites we got, but the select board has, as I think I was on record before, I said the select board has not taken a position on this, and I said sooner or later we have to take a position on it as a board. And I would assume after this point that this item can't go citizens petition anymore. It's going to have to be accepted after this study is done. We must approach this as a goal-type project that we're going to pursue, because it'll be at that point, Paul. I mean, right now, that really what they've done, they've proven that they need, or that there is a need for a new senior center or a larger senior center. And they've looked at, so that part of the study is very, very, very valid. And right now, they're just trying to flush out the rest of the approved money to say, okay, well, let's look at two sites, and then we can come back to the board. I would anticipate the next meeting with this board will be much more beneficial. Go ahead.
I apologize, because I must have been absent that day. But this is a citizen's petition. I don't understand why we're discussing it. It'll vote up and down based on the benefit, the merits of the citizen's petition written the way it is. I have personal questions for whoever brought this forward, and certainly for the Council on Aging, and those have nothing at all to do with this citizen's petition. And I'd love to ask those questions of those people at the appropriate time. But at this point, for all we know, the sites could be, tear down one of the elementary schools and put it there for all, I mean, and citizens can ask to do a siting plan for anything, anywhere, which may or may not come to fruition. So let them go forward, let all the people who have questions about it bring up the questions at the town meeting, and we'll see where it goes from there. But if this had been done in a different way, I think there would have been a lot more questions. So you say that they're looking for dialogue. like I said, I was absent that day because I haven't heard anybody come to me looking for a dialogue, and if they've come to you, Rich, we ought to bring them in
They've been
here.
before
Actually, I
this
think you were
board twice.
absent.
You were
Right.
and I thought with the dialogue.
Was he actually absent?
Yes, he was.
Okay, you were gone,
He was.
okay.
It was not the meeting. It was the night we had the snow, and we were not televised.
Yeah.
And I think we had a good discussion. I think there's no dialogue about after this, what's the next step? Because I don't think anybody really knows. And Paul, you said your point's well taken, and you know we'll see how town meeting feels about this and where it leads us next. But we are keeping a watchful eye on the process and not letting it get too far ahead of where the board is in terms of which is essentially right now neutral, but not letting this get to the point where the board is now painted into a corner on something. So we're mindful of that, and I appreciate the comment.
One thing that does concern me, since this is an A follows B, I don't know if I haven't gone back and looked recently, if the PVPC study on the adult center is posted on our town website, but if it's not, it ought to be, so the citizens can see what the results of that study, the final study were.
I believe it is, but-
Okay, it may very well be, Stephen, but I think people need to understand that study when they understand if this is a follow-up to that.
Yeah.
It may very well be there.
I'm wrestling with my computer, Mark, sorry.
Do we, get back to the other question. Pardon?
Sorry about that.
No, that's fine, Paul. Do we want to close this warrant?
Yes.
If we're reopening at the next
Yeah,
meeting.
that's what I was wondering. It's not finished. We've got to reopen it, so.
Is that
We
true?
can go
We
through the
need to
procedure,
reopen it?
close the warrant, and we'll reopen it and put the stuff on it, but it doesn't.
Well, right, when we get the final budget and the capital plan, and everything,
It
that's how it
will be
works.
reopened.
That's how it's worked.
Yeah, okay.
The three
So,
warrants I've seen.
Entertain a motion to close the warrant?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay.
Wait, where did you?
Yeah, I
She
voted for it,
voted.
doesn't matter, we're going to reopen it
We're gonna
anyways.
we're gonna reopen it, yeah.
a little bit late.
This is now just slow. And when we reopen it, everything goes flying in, so.
Okay, we'll revert back, can you get a motion to approve the February 9th, 2015 special meeting and the February 17th? We'll take them separately. How about the
I move
February
to
9th?
approve the February 9th, 2015 regular or special meeting minutes.
Second?
Was I at that one? I was, okay, I'll second it.
Okay. Any discussion?
Yeah, I wasn't there, so I'm going to abstain from it, but I would comment that I've noticed some things in there that were like Feloka spelled wrong and other items like that, but more importantly, there is a reference to a motion and an amended motion, but the motion nor the amendment are in the minutes, and for somebody like me who wasn't there, it doesn't give it any clarity to what happened.
that?
And the debt management policy, it says, the motion to amend was seconded by Mr. Grant, the amendment carried 3-1 with Mr. Santinello opposing. The motion to, as amended, carried, but it has no comment on what the motion was or what the amendment was.
There was a motion to accept as presented, and there were a couple words that were softened up, like, we'll strive to, not that we will.
I
do,
understand that, but I mean, somebody who's trying to
Yeah, I
understand from the minutes what
If they're not in
happened,
there, I'm just trying to
ought to know
straighten out what it
what's
should
in the
say.
minutes, but
Okay,
I mean, that,
I can fix it.
those are my only comments, is that motions by open meeting law, all motions must be in the minutes, and they weren't in this case.
Rich, I'm going to withdraw that, and if we can get them for my motion, if we to approve them, maybe we can get them for the next meeting.
Sure.
Just so they're in there.
Okay. You want to withdraw your second?
Yeah, withdraw.
Okay, okay.
Good catch, Mark.
Okay. So do we want a motion to accept the February 17th?
You guys got to do that, we weren't here.
Yeah, why would?
Right, and I have a lot of comments, and rather than do that, I'd
Okay.
like to feed them to Rebecca so we can get them clarified.
So we'll,
Amongst which is the same comment that there was a motion about a policy that also wasn't in there. so.
motion to defer the minutes?
So moved.
Second?
No, second.
All in favor?
Hi.
Okay.
Oh, we should have did that at the beginning.
Yeah, I should have done that at the beginning. It gives us a routine. K-9 unit. This should be fun. K-9 unit.
Yes, so at the last meeting, and I know you and Paul weren't here, it was in the packet I had applied for, but we had not yet received a grant for a K-9 unit from the Stanton Foundation. This had come up a couple years ago, and the board did not want to proceed at that time with it over some concerns about continued costs. When we received the grant information again, I reevaluated it on the grounds that, and I think I laid this out in my town manager's report from the last packet. The two primary factors were the rash of property crimes that have hit this community recently, some of which we did call for a K-9 unit for assistance from state police and other jurisdictions, and the surrounding community mitigation funds that we will be receiving from MGM starting when they open, which would probably pick up just about right when the first 3 years of the program, which are funded by the grant, would be over. The costs to operate the program each year are probably in the $5,000 range, if that. 25 grand covers all the costs in the first 3 years, and that includes the cost of the dog, the cost of equipment that is kind of non-recurring. So the operational costs are I guess I would term minimal. And I brought it back. And like I said, I did note that I was relatively new when we brought this forward. I did discuss. It also prompted a larger discussion about grants and who can, applying for grants and accepting them, and what, roles and responsibilities on that regard. And I did forward tonight an email I did receive from town council about that subject. But the short of it is, I think that the K-9 unit is now. I truthfully think the board raised valid concerns. And I don't think 2 years ago was really the right time for this. But now, knowing what we know now, and knowing that there's a way to fund this going forward for the foreseeable future, I think now is the right time to do this. So that's why I brought it back up.
Okay. Somebody want to put a motion on so we can get this under discussion then?
Well, what would the motion be? Because that's, I think Mark and I were batting that back and forth. Is there a requirement that according to the grant, that the select board or a authority approve it beyond? And there's not, so.
Well, can I answer that more thoroughly?
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I thought that was the answer.
Yeah. Well, no, and I do, and I want to preface my answer by saying that, the comment was made at the last meeting about asserting authority, and, and that's not what this is about. I want to preface my answer by saying I'm not trying to turn this into a larger issue. We raised a genuine question for me because I genuinely did not know, if we receive a grant, how does that work? There are certain times when the grantor, meaning the people giving us the money, require select board approval. And we brought those forward when that's the case. But generally, according to the opinion I received today from town council, the language in the charter that talks about the town manager's grant coordination means that the town manager can apply for and accept grants so long as the grantor does not require a vote of the elected body. And in this case, the Stanton Foundation does not require such a vote.
Then why is it on the agenda?
I can answer that if you, because it's on the agenda because when neither of you were here, the 3 board members that were present at the last meeting decided that they weren't sure they wanted to move forward. I didn't have the opinion from town council, and they decided they wanted to have it addressed at the full board. And then, like I said, I received the opinion today. But and like I said, Paul, to be honest, I don't want this to be perceived as something I'm trying to sneak past the board or run swim against the current. I just feel like it's a good policy idea, and the concerns that were raised 2 years ago, I feel have been mitigated by circumstances that have changed, and that was the nature of my presentation. So.
Yeah, I think there's two issues. I think one is the canine issue, and the other one is the opinion that was brought before us. And I've already told Stephen that under the guise of a grant, it's absolutely true. This is a hybrid grant. This is a grant that will run out and it will then become a liability on the community, which is.
But that's like, Richard, that's like all grants. It's not really a
But
hybrid.
if a normal grant runs out, you get rid of the person that was hired under the grant.
And that's the case here too.
But I don't think that's what, I understand, but I think the question goes beyond that. To me, it does. You haven't heard my whole thing yet, so don't jump in and get me turned sideways on you. Okay. We are not bound by any legal opinion. There's a recommendation made to this board, and I wanted to have a conversation on the fact that I think what Dave said is right on normal grants. I think this is a different type of grant in that it goes beyond 3 years, and then it actually is a liability. It's placed on a community. Now, that said, if all of what we said before about the casinos bringing crime to our communities, if that is to have credence, and it's been drummed home many times on camera and in the newspapers and et cetera, then having a trial period on a K-9 unit during the startup period of the casino certainly would seem to be consistent with what we stated was our reasons for mitigation, et cetera. And I realize that I just pushed the can 3 years down the road. But there is some consistency in that thought process that if we are to believe what was told and what certain members of the board actually stated, that we'd see an increase in crime. I shared with Steve, and I wish there was some way that we could say that this officer would reside in our community and that this dog would be available, bingo, but we can't do that. We don't have that capability, so you just have to go the luck of the draw. But. Yes, Steve.
I would say that I think in the police contract there is, distance from town that you can live. So it's not luck of the draw. It would just be consistent. And we're not going to hire a new officer. We're going to interview existing officers who want to participate. And to be honest with you, we may get through that process and realize that nobody wants to do this and be back to square one. But we wanted to, it's a non-competitive grant. So we sent in our letters and we got the money, or I should say we were approved for the money. Like I said, I think for valid and the other thing is, like you said, if this doesn't work for us, and we find that we're paying overtime to send the dog to other places, or just it's not helping crimes the way the police department thinks today that it will, then we can get out of it. And like I said, I think the cost exposure on this is really small.
Okay, well, Paul, you said, why is it on the agenda? It's a good question. If we're to accept this a legal opinion, it does not belong on the agenda. So what is the thoughts of the board? Go ahead, Mike.
I'm not looking for us to vote on it. I will, though, since my opinion was asked, I'm going to offer my opinion, and that is that I think it's presumptuous of us, in general, to look to allocate MGM funds for anything at this point, whether it's a K-9 unit or a traffic study or a traffic repairs, or anything else, because we have absolutely no clue what the actual impacts will be. And so, I think that the financial justification of this ought to be, we got 3 years paid, the police chief strongly supports it, and if the budget comes up at the end of 3 years, he's going to absorb it into his budget. Period. And if we can't get a statement like that, then it's I'm going to do it because financially. But really, that's what I have yet to hear, is a police chief say, I strongly support it, it's going to help our community, it's going to help my law enforcement capabilities, and it's so nominal that I could absorb this in our budget after 3 years if that's what ended up happening. So, and I'm hoping to go back to hear him say that at some point, but I certainly don't want to go into this with the presumption that we're going to use MGM money should the need arise.
Okay,
And that's my personal opinion.
Your point's well taken, and the grant is for 3 years. We found out tonight we are getting a new chief of police. So we will have a new chief of police coming in, so that's having Bob sit here and tell to us at this point, it likely is not much value except for Bob's reputation.
He'll make all
as a
promises
fine-
for the
Yeah,
next
he's-
guy, right?
Bob's gonna say anything he wants to.
I mean, he said virtually that 2 years ago.
Not the finance part.
Well,
Okay.
So, I guess the question is, does this board want this as an issue, even if we're not able to vote on it, or do we want to just say, fine, we accept what it is, and go get your dog?
well, I think the question is, do we accept the attorney's opinion? And my opinion is, I'm accepting his opinion. And
That's another opinion.
yeah, that's another opinion. So in other words, if I accept the attorney's opinion, then I don't think we need to vote on it. If you want to hear what I think about the police dog, I think I've made that clear.
You have.
200 cars were broken into, 8 houses, and we don't even have MGM here yet. I mean, the crime issue in Springfield is serious and is coming down into Longmeadow, and I don't want to wait and see it get worse. I want to be able to put in preventive measures. If we can do this without any cost or minimal cost to the town for the next 3 years, and I would have no problem, if I'm still on the board, 3 years, saying, well, we're going to shoo that dog out. It was not worth it. It did not help us once. And I'm not spending $5,000 a year on it. So looking at it now, I say, well,
Okay,
let's see
then
what
I guess,
happens.
then I guess it's appropriate if I ask for a motion to lay on the table the board's consideration on this issue and allow the town manager to proceed.
As long as I get to say my piece and then you can do that.
Okay, excuse me, Paul, go ahead.
No, that's all right.
I'm sorry, bud.
I've heard this before with the crime statistics, and I can tell you that it's all anecdotal, because if the dog were here or not here, when the house was broken in, if it was here, it had to be in that neighborhood and had to be released at the time the house was broken into. If the break-in happened at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and the dog officer doesn't come on shift until 4 o'clock in the afternoon, then it does no good. I think it's all anecdotal to say that the dog would have prevented a crime, and I know we called them in, but I think every community that you look at that does have dogs, whether Springfield has 2 or 3 on every shift, or at least on all 3 shifts, let's put it that way, and they still have crime, they still have break-ins, they still have drug sales, they still have all this other stuff. What I'm disappointed in is that if the answer to fight crime in this town is to bring a dog on, which is going to take an officer actually off duty, because we were told by the officer from Wilbraham in the presentation a year and a half ago, each dog has 2 disciplines. The 2 disciplines require 4 hours of training per month. That's what we were told 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, whatever it was. That's 8 hours a month minimum. If they go into another community, they're offered comp time for the time they're called into the other community. If they come into town where they work and it's not their shift, they're given overtime dollars for that. I think the cost is more than $5,000. I think that's a very low estimate. And if the answer is that we need that dog to fight crime, I'm disappointed that our police chief, with all of the rash of break-ins and the home break-ins, the car break-ins and home break-ins, didn't ask for more patrol officers in the budget, because that's how you fight crime, by putting more cops on the street. And that wasn't brought before us. In this year's budget, the police chief did not say a dog was a priority. Because the budget was submitted, the grant came in after the budget was submitted by the police chief. And that's what I'm just disappointed in, that, saying the dog is going to cure all our ills. I quite frankly, you can accept the grant all you want. I think it's the worst thing that could be done for this town, because it is nothing more than a fluff piece. Yes, they do help fight crime. You can get horses. Boston uses horses to help fight crime and go into neighborhoods and do riot control and whatever, but I don't think that's the answer. If it's meant to fight crime, then hire another cop. Because actually what you're doing, if you guys really understand it, is that you are taking a police officer off of the street more by having a dog than you are by having another cop. And that's the issue, is it will take a police officer off the street more, based on the testimony that we heard from the Wilbraham, the dog officer, that it's 8 hours a month minimum comp time for dog training. And if the shift doesn't, I believe at the time that the police chief said he was going to, his thoughts were to put the dog on, I believe, the 4 to 12 shift. It could either be that one or the 12 to 8, but I believe he said 4 to 12. And we're assuming all those crimes take place between 4 and 12. I think it's a waste of resources. And again, fight crime, hire more cops. That's how you fight crime. but I don't know if you need to lay it on the table, Richard, because it wasn't brought up as a motion.
Okay. Permanent Building Committee.
Okay, in your packet is, in last week's packet, should be back in this week's as well. There's there's a draft policy, I believe, and a draft kind of roles and responsibilities for a permanent building committee. We talked about this briefly. This delegation from town, including myself and Richard, went up to the town of Westford to look at their DPW facility, which is a good comp in terms of size and scope of operations and sort of profile of the community, and we wanted to see how they got theirs built and learn. And now theirs was done in 2006. I'm sorry, that's an old business. And so one of the things that we learned from them is that they established a permanent town building committee, and it's basically like a capital planning committee for buildings, building projects. So, I mean, certainly it got impaneled to do the new DPW, but any building project over $50,000, so a boiler replacement on a school or a new roof or something like that, a large-scale building project would go to this group of citizens for review, like I said, similar to a capital planning committee. According to the folks in Westford, it worked extremely well. They had, as you can see from the documents, you try and get people who have, advanced knowledge of architecture, engineering, construction trades, real estate, things like that, to be involved, and it provides, just like I said, just like capital planning, it's a outside view of projects for a higher level of scrutiny. That if you're going to move forward with something big like that, it helps develop buy-in with town meeting. So I think it's a great idea. I strongly recommend the board establish a committee, even maybe recommend a bylaw in this warrant to town meeting, and panel this committee. So as the work on the DPW facility, which we'll be getting going in a matter of weeks, we can have a group impaneled by, say, this fall, and really pick this project up. Like I said, it's not just DPW either. I mean, as we talk about, to answer the questions that would be raised during the discussion about the proper site for the COA, this committee could certainly help with its level of expertise. The schools have made it clear that they're going to be submitting a statement of interest for a middle school. Having this committee would be helpful during that discussion and process. It would not replace a school building committee, but it would be able to work in conjunction. So it makes a lot of sense for this town, and especially for where we are with building projects we have on the radar screen.
Is there a motion to accept?
Yeah, and can I just make it says draft, let me say big stamp on draft. I basically took Westford's, went through, and I did not make very many changes at all. What they had made sense. It seems to work for them, but I'm not particularly wedded to either the committee charge or the policies and policy procedures. I mean, I guess what I'd recommend is, if the board's happy with it, let's go with it and make changes as we need to going forward. If the board wants to reconsider, then I would maybe send this to the operations subcommittee or policy subcommittee. Policy subcommittee, but I think, like I said, it's pretty straight ahead based on what you have in front of you. But that's if people have concerns about the specifics of it.
Did you want to say something?
No, I was just thinking, should we put the motion on the table and then start the discussion, or?
I prefer to discuss it before we do that, because we may or may not put a motion on the table.
Okay.
Go ahead.
There are things I really like about this, and things I really would rather not see in here that are in here. And I guess the first question I have is, does this board want to abdicate or delegate? And I say that because many of these responsibilities ought to lie with the select board, and we can certainly delegate them, But if we do, does this become an advisory committee, or does this become an empowered committee? And I got to tell you, my personal opinion is, as an appointed committee, I'm not sure it should be empowered, as opposed to an advisory. Having sat for most of the last couple of years on the school building committee, there is a ton of work that goes into sitting on a town building committee for any kind of project. What I like about this is, and I would suggest that we do, is if we have a particular project, we do this on an ad hoc basis and appoint an advisory committee to be the DPW building committee or something like that, or the whatever. But the fact is that if it came to schools, we couldn't do it because the state has a school building committee policy, procedure, makeup, which would supersede this by state law. I think that if we're working on a DPW facility, you know, there's a lot there that I'm not convinced that you want these same people spread so thin that they're doing a bunch of different buildings at the same time. You know, based on what I saw, you know, and I'll tell you, it was mostly the chairs, the co-chairs of the school building committee who literally spent every day in this building and the project for it. And so when you look at the idea of having a group of knowledgeable people overseeing a significant investment by the town in buildings, I think is a great idea. But I would not want to see a standing committee to whom we delegate an awful lot of authority here that, you know, that I wouldn't want to delegate, as opposed to, you know, having it be an advisory committee, short of being very, very specific. And I can go through this line by line. I've made a lot of comments on the thing, and I think that if it worked for Westford, that's great. But you know, if we want to do it for DPW facility, we'll do it for a DPW facility. But I don't think overseeing building maintenance, large maintenance projects. You know, I'm questioning what's the role of our maintenance department if we're going to oversee large maintenance projects with this kind of committee. So, you know, I think I've gotten the gist across of what I think of this, and I'd like to move forward with some other consideration.
Go ahead.
See, I'm looking at it a different way. I'm not looking at it at 5,000 feet. I'm looking at 10 to 30,000. And that's why this, I think, is offering something we don't have right now, which is, let's look at the total plan of what we're doing. Let's look at the next 10 to 20 years. And when he says, why are we looking at large maintenance projects? Because one of the things we're saying is, why are we putting money in Williams or in Glenbrook? Is that at Glenbrook? Because we don't know what we're doing 10 years out. And I think this type of committee is going to sit there and look at all the pieces that are on the board. And of course, I think almost, except for the school building committee, like you said, that's almost from Mass General Laws. All of these committees are advisory to us. And what they should be doing is come in and looking at the big long-range plan, seeing how things fit in. So when we see the boilers coming up, we pull the building committee, see how is this looking on the long-range plan. Maintaining inventory of buildings, fabulous. Maintain the long-term building needs list for the town. So, you know, I don't think they should be getting down in the nitty-gritty of what we're doing with DPW. They should be farther up here, and all the projects should be filtering through so that one of the things I understood is then we're looking at efficiencies. So if we have 2 building projects going on town that we're seeing, well, is there any way we can share resources so that the design costs are a little bit less, or that we're using bulldozers here, bulldozers there? And I think it's just another tool in the box for the select board, because as you said, it's a lot of work. And right now, it's something that's on the town manager's plate, that he's supposed to maintain an inventory. Like you said, well, DPW is supposed to be doing this, but I think it's sort of nice for us to finally get up to that 30,000 feet, and that's why I was
Maria,
excited about this.
I appreciate that, but just take the first sentence of the second paragraph.
Of which,
The function
are we
and
talking the
duties-
charge?
Right, committee charge. The
Okay.
function and duties of the Permanent Town Building Committee shall be to determine how and at what cost the future needs of town buildings can be met.
Okay.
Why wouldn't it say to advise the select board on how? And is it this committee who's to determine?
because that pours a lot of responsibility and authority then. And review new construction and/or renovations of town buildings.
Well, because
You know,
I
but-
think, well, you could even say with consultation, if we wanted to get into the nitty-gritty of it, with consultation with the finance department, finance committee. So I think if you want to add a line saying that to report to the select board, you know, I would think it'd be wonderful if they came up with an idea, well, look, we're talking about building a DPW, we're talking about a middle school in these many years. This is how the effect can be on the, on our tax rate, or what, are we going to have to look at an override? But that's something that the building committee wouldn't do by itself. It would have to be in conjunction with the finance department as well as discussing with the finance committee. So I think, I don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater, but if we want to make some alterations to this, I wouldn't have problems.
Yeah, I think, Mark, I don't know if you had specific authorities in mind. You know, I think what you're right, and that language is strong there, and it's certain. And that's why I put in there as a placeholder, because I want to get a dialogue going and get the board's input.
Okay.
I think the authority. I mean, right now, I mean, to really give I think the level of authority that this committee has would maybe necessitate a charter change. Because
think so.
the authority for the buildings is one of the vested town manager authorities, you know, to be responsible for maintenance, repair of all town property and school property placed under town manager's control by a charter bylaw or town meeting vote. So I think there is a case you've made that this could be a town manager's task force, but I feel like the point of this is to be advisory in nature and to give the town manager and the select board jointly, because there are a fair amount of decisions when the scale gets big enough, the select board ultimately makes decisions to put a bond issuance or any other kind of appropriation of that scale on a town meeting warrant. So I do agree with you, Mark, that it should be advisory in nature. That first paragraph does come on a little strong, and I'm happy to roll it back. If the board feels more comfortable being the town manager's task force, I'm happy to entertain that. I just felt like having some more ownership of this committee and its process was something the board would want to guide, like I said, to guide the town manager and the select board jointly.
Yeah. How about Marie? Why don't you guys take this and deal with, Mark, you take it in your policy subcommittee and rework this thing up into a final draft and bring it back.
Well, are there other input, like advisory, I understand, but is there other
Well,
input
Mark
of
has a lot of
what?
comments that he's made on his
You've already,
laptop.
okay.
Yeah, but they almost all center around this concept of advisory. But again, you know, I think there's some real value for having a school building committee type organization if the town's going out for a adult center, a DPW, whatever it is. But I'll tell you, one of the greatest criticisms I heard from people in town with the school building committee is, under whose authority are they acting? And the answer is, under the state's authority in that case. But in this case, we'd have to, I'd like to be able to say, they're answerable to the select board.
Exactly.
And that's my biggest thing, is that, you know, if somebody's out there, the people, you know, who are making decisions on a multi-million-dollar building, you know, they ought to be responsible to somebody who's elected, as opposed to because they're appointed for 3 years. That's all.
Well, they'd be responsible as select board and town manager.
Well, and I think, you know, Mark, like you said, the MSBA, the school building committee really is not, I think it's it's intuitive to go to that because it involves buildings, but it's really not a good corollary, because it is a state, the membership is prescribed by state statute, and they have responsibilities that really exceed greatly what I think we have envisioned for this committee. Like I said, I think I started off with, Capital Planning Committee goes through and reviews all projects, and there's no, unfortunately, Capital Planning Committee's role other than receiving the report from me and then bringing it to the select board their recommendations. Capital Planning Committee, in terms of composition and everything else, isn't really defined. Maybe defined in the bylaws, but that's the model. Is they go through, they make their report, they make their recommendation. The select board can say, we like Capital Planning Committee's recommendation, we don't. This just gets to a level of specificity with buildings. And if we feel like the Capital Planning Committee can handle this job, then we can leave it as is. If we feel like we want to kind of provide additional support, advisory, and And if you guys think that it just should be an ad hoc town manager task force on the DPW facility, like the site selection committee was, I'm happy to do it that way either, or as well.
My personal opinion would be that, you know, if you as the town manager who has responsibility for all the facilities, want an advisory team to talk about, you know, maintenance and all, that's great. I have no problem with that. But that's very different from somebody who's overseeing, or a group that's overseeing the construction and the, which was in here. It was really, and I really do draw an analogy between this, you know, some of the things in here and what the school committee does. When there's a specific project that we're working on, I think that's very different from, you know, how do we evaluate whether we ought to be upgrading the HVAC system or replacing it or repairing it or something like in an existing building. I'm fine with going out and having a standing committee, Stephen, that advises you and Mike Rabel and Yem Lip and all that kind of stuff, who consist of all these experts in these fields. That's very, very different, though, to me from you know, what I saw this as, which is project specific, when we've got a major project, as opposed to maintaining the operation.
Why is that? Why you say that's a good thing in the sense of you can say a committee's being formed and it's going to be advisory to the select board, and that's Pollyannish, because all of the committees that we appoint are advisory to the select board. And how many have you heard from? Okay,
Yeah.
maybe one or two that come in after there's an issue in front of them. What I don't understand is, you know, there's 13 buildings in town. Our town spent, by the way, tens of thousands of dollars on the JCJ report, which clearly identified what we needed to do in our buildings, but I know that's sitting on a shelf somewhere. But there's 13 buildings in town, 6 of which are schools, 4 of which are not going to be replaced, rebuilt, or anything soon because they just were done. And we already know that it's in the works to replace the other 2 middle schools. So we're talking about 7 buildings. And I don't understand why you need a committee when you have a facilities director, DPW director, an engineer, town manager, everybody else involved in government, to say, how are we going to take care of those 7 buildings? A task force is a task force, and we have no say in what's being developed as a task force, or how often they meet, or what their charge is. But to create a standing committee to really look at 7 buildings in town, one that you can take off, which is the old town hall, because it was just done. So that leaves 6 buildings in town, which is one's the police department and fire department, which were just recently built 10 years ago. So take those 2 off. So we want to put a committee together to look at 3 buildings in town. The DPW, the Council on Aging, and so forth. And and quite frankly, you're talking things were already mentioned tonight about, well, you need a boiler replaced. This is a committee that would do it. No, that's our facilities director that would do that. And I'm sure there's a schedule, that we have a new boiler here at the high school, or whatever it is, air handling system, and it's got a 15 to 20-year lifespan, and then we're going to replace it within that time frame. I don't see a building committee talking about the maintenance needs of the buildings in town and saying they're going to make recommendations to the select board on how to address those issues. That's why we have a facilities director and a DPW director to do those kind of things. And I think it's silly to look at this and say, we've got 13 buildings in town, of which you look at 3 or 4 of them. And I know they're big projects. The DPW is a big project.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and move on. There's no appetite for the board to embrace this.
Yeah, because it's actually doing long-term planning. It's actually,
We'll just move
okay, just so you don't.
Not the way it's written, Marie, it doesn't come across as
Okay, so we're just going to throw it out, that's
No,
right.
I'm not saying
Now he
throw it
says
out.
you don't want to do it. Do you want it to go to the subcommittee, or are we just going to forget about it and say, it's the town manager's job, let the town manager do it? Let's not get a group to advise us, because we're going to make decisions anyways. So I'm just surprised by the attitude. So that's all right. I'm sorry, Richard. I thought it was a great idea.
Coughing, a lot of coughing up there. We'll go ahead. There's no appetite for us tonight, so let's shelf it back. We'll rethink the process and come back. I'm going to skip the goals. The reason I put the goals back on there is I've spent a lot of time going back and looking at previous year's goals and many towns across the Commonwealth goals, and there's no model. Everybody's doing it basically different, and some are doing it modified, some are doing it detailed. So I will come back. I am going to come back but not at this point. So I'm going to put this as a place marker, keep throwing this place marker as goals. Yes, Steve?
I just wanted to add, to put this in context, though, the GFOA budget document includes accomplishments and goals for every department. Last year, we did not include anything for the select board.
Right.
And to some extent, when they do the GFOA scoring, overall goals for the organization are something that the GFOA looks at in terms of how they evaluate best practices. We included money in our recommended budget to pursue recognition for having a best practices GFOA budget. If we're going to go through the trouble, let's get the award, quite
Well,
honestly.
we did have some accomplishments so that you can put
We
in.
did.
Wait a minute, there's
Yeah.
a list of goals, and there's been
Yeah,
some things that
right.
you
Yeah, there's some
So,
things been done.
the reason why I say this is I'm working on that section of the narrative part of the budget, and I will work with Richard on kind of creating that first draft. But as we circulate it to the board, I just want to say that the subject of goals, setting aside the regular business of the town, there is a need to establish, even taking the goals to a higher level, to really impact the evaluation of our GFOA budget. And if you want us to make some recommendations that we think they would like, go look at other GFOA best budget, best practice goals and submit some recommendations. We can do that. But I just want to say there's a second context to the goals discussion that is kind of pressing right now in our budget process.
Let me get one thing, and Maureen, I'll come back. And I also feel that one of the charges that I'll take on is that, if nothing else, we will present a policy statement on goals for this year, and that we're going to put some framework around how we do, not so much the process how we do, but that we will do goals, and we'll do them by this date, and they'll be tied into this. There's a lot of reference out there, and we don't have it in our policy statements now. And we have accomplished some stuff this year, and we're going to accomplish more, but I think that'll be the main contribution, and going forward, we can't stymie ourselves. We've got a goal policy statement. Maureen?
Yeah, I would be interested to see what other goals by other GFA award winner towns, because that might help focus what we're supposed to be doing here.
A lot of the goals are very, very, very generic.
Oh, they are?
Yeah,
So
I mean,
it's
they're
like
very
balance your
broad.
budget without free cash? Or-
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
even broader than that, some of them are. I mean, they're just basically, we will continue to support. It's that kind of fuzzy thing.
Like broad policy goals.
Yeah.
That would be great,
I will
yes, if we
continue
could
to
see what they
support the
are.
efforts to reduce expenditures and blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. So it fluffs down and
I
not
just
really
don't want it
doing
to seem like we're throwing it in like a grenade in the goals discussion. It really is for the purposes of fulfilling our requirements under GFOA.
Right, and I'm going to bring this back. I told Stephen to put it back on his place marker, but I'm looking at the time, and we got Mark's issue, and Mark's coughing 2 times for every 20 seconds now, so, and I'm sitting right beside this guy, and I'm getting over my cold, so.
Now it's your issue.
Yeah, now it's my issue, so, Mark, I'm going to shelve the gold issue on water meters is on tap.
Yeah, the issue was, do we want to support allowing residents who so desire to install a separate water meter for irrigation that will not be subject to sewage fees? And at the last meeting, Mike Rabel and Pete Thurber came here, and they presented, and I think you saw it in the packet, there's a picture of, what the diagram's gonna look like that people have to have installed by a licensed plumber, and what the rules are. The upside is that people who've been complaining for years that, when I water my lawn, I'm charged for sewage, will have a way out of that. The downside is that, it's gonna cost them some money. I think we were throwing around numbers like it might be a 3-year to 4-year payback, because by the time they, buy and install a meter, that 200 units of water, whatever it is, that they're saving, may not be, have a 1-year payback. It may have a multi-year payback. So that's the question at hand. Clearly, the complicating factor for us is that, can you have it both ways? In other words, if we say we're authorizing separate water meters, do we eliminate the 200 100 cubic yard water maximum on sewage and thereby push people to a separate meter? Or do we say, we're going to keep the same 200 100 cubic yard maximum for people who don't put in a separate meter, but for those who do, you don't have any limit? Excuse me. My take on this would be,
I'm sorry about that cough, John.
so my take on this would be, people have asked for it for many, many years, and I think we ought to be offering this to the residents of the town. And the reason we didn't for years and years is because it was very costly for us to read a second meter. We've eliminated that with our automatic meter reading system, and it's a service for those who want it. So I'd just like to hear, now with the whole board here, what people think about it.
Okay. I'll share my opinions with you. I think there's a lot of ways to skin the cat, and I prefer the easiest way to skin the cat, which a lot of communities have already embraced and endorsed, is figuring your minimum billing. By looking at your winter billing on sewage, you look at a 4-month period, and you have a minimum billing rate for sewage that customer can afford all year long, and you set that, and that becomes their cap, and that you don't worry about the second meter. You just bill the water, and you can even put multi-tiers on your water for excessive use. For instance, I mean, I've got 3 going on 4 years worth of data on my home meter right now. I read it the same day, same time in the morning, every day. And my units are averaging for the winter time over a 3-year period at 3.39 units. And I'm a home of 2 people. I don't know if I'm typical of a 2-family home, but that's what we're dealing with. And it ran from 3.91 down to 2.95. Now, after even a brief amount of period, you can figure this statistically is where am I at. Now, even if you set me at 4 and you said, okay, this resident is 4, and we can read the meters, you're right. This data is available now. We no longer have to play games. Then you set it at 4, and you've done everything that you said you've done.
And Richard, if I just could, I think because we can read it, as opposed to estimate, and I understand you want to say something, but, you know, one of my arguments from which I have no data is that most people tend to use more water in the summer than in the winter, particularly if you have a family with kids whose clothes get dirtier and you do more loads of wash. You might, who knows, you might wash your cars, you might, you know.
Cars doesn't count.
Cars doesn't count, but
Right.
but certainly you do more loads of wash, you take more showers, whatever it is.
I don't know if that's valid, because...
Okay, you're right, it may not be valid, but the fact is that because we can measure it, we don't have to decide whether it's valid. We can just say, we're gonna measure actual water usage.
But that's only just a very small amount of people. I figured it up on mine. It would take me, on the current rates of what you've got in your proposal, it would take me over close to 10 years to get a payback on that meter. Based on, and I put it at 16 CCFs a month.
Which means you probably wouldn't put in a second meter.
I mean, well, but you have to figure, now I'm a 2-person family, and I think there's a lot of people in this town fall under mine or less on water usage.
Then what's been the beefing that we've heard for years and years about?
Well, I say,
water
what I'm
meters?
trying to say, Mark, is subtract the beefing. We don't need to bill these people and then to put this monstrously $75 annual check on their pressure regulator or their backflow preventer, which is not on there now. I mean, we're adding regulation to a simple process that many other communities across America have solved very, very cleanly. They've just said, okay, we know what your minimum billing is, that's your winter usage, and that's your sewage charge, and you can audit it every couple of years. And they let it roll. The thing is going to be, if there's any adjustments made whatsoever, it's going to show up pretty quick in our community, because you and I both know that rates are being subsidized by other users right now. Because if I turn on my sprinkler system, I'm paying sewage on it, and that means that the sewage in this town is artificially low. Because Mike is not shipping that sewage that I'm putting on my yard to Bodie Island for treatment. So, and his rate is set on how much he's shipping out here. So as soon as we start doing this, the rates are going to automatically start to shift a great deal. Another point worth noting, which is kind of the negative side, something you don't think about with the meters. Apparently, some of the municipalities had put them in, and they went through restrictions on water usage, and they started issuing fines based on the usage on their water meters, on their irrigation meters.
Whoa.
Yeah. And they immediately, and I mean, this is some of the
Everyone's
research you get off the
ripping
net on some of the stuff that's been coming back. But there is going to be, when you think through the process, there'll be a lot of shifts take place. Now, if I'm a heavy user and I got a massive irrigation system, I'll sign up at the bar today because that's going to mean a lot to me. But you can't, don't sell this on the fact it's going to save every consumer or every household in here if they get an irrigation meter, if they get an irrigation system, because the payback is so horrendous on some of them, unless they use a lot of water.
It actually isn't necessarily to save the homeowner money as well. I'm sorry, Marie, you had your hand
Yeah.
up. You
No,
want
no,
to-
go ahead. Yeah.
Isn't necessarily to save the homeowner money. It's actually to get better billing, more accurate billing. The people who do water their lines absolutely subsidize the sewage rates, and they subsidize yours and mine water.
Right.
So if I'm the person that waters my lawn every day or twice a day, and there's some people like that in town, my alternative is to put a well in or to have an irrigation meter. And there's a break-even analysis for a well for irrigation purposes and things like that. So
Right.
the issue isn't necessarily muddling anything up. If it's given the opportunity to those who want it. I mean, I wouldn't put an irrigation meter in because
Right.
I water my lawn the way, if it's not raining, I might water. If it's hot I'm not the prototypical user that might want that, golf course lawn on my front lawn. So, but I think what it does is it gives those folks that are actually using it. Listen, the artificial cap that we have on sewage is pick it out of the air because that's where it came from.
Yep,
And I'm sure
certainly
there might
was.
have been some formula years ago, but we've had the same cap on sewage rates
And-
for
and-
my time on the board, so that really hasn't changed.
And
So,
that thing is so astronomically high compared to what other communities are charging.
right, so my point is, it's not fair and accurate billing.
Yeah.
And I think all the irrigation meter does is give those folks that want one the ability to have it. I mean, we went to DPW's got all the numbers, they did all the work, and then when it came time to give the go-ahead,
Well, what I'm telling you is you can do it without all the meters, though. I mean, you can do it, and statistically, it's going to be whatever the meters are and whatever the cost is at the end of the year. The prices are going to adjust around. Somebody's going to be paying more, and somebody's going to be
But
paying
you're
less.
doing it statistically, and what I'm saying is, let's do it exactly.
Well, yeah,
with
but
a meter.
the exactly does have a lot of inherent problems. You get a sale on an ownership of a house, now what are you going to do? The owner says, I'm not paying for this stupid thing.
Then take it out.
Yeah, well, I mean, you get this wasted equipment, it's just,
Can I? Sorry, Marie, go ahead.
I'm not sure people in Long Meadow really want fair and accurate, okay? 'Cause I'm going to say two things, okay? You don't have a big yard and a lot of irrigation, your rates are going to go up, okay? Which is going to be very irritating. Then I say one other thing, and you actually said it at the meeting, and I just went, and that is Bay Path University. Okay, you take some of these big organizations and they stop slapping those meters on, and they're going to say, "Oh my gosh, we've been paying double on the sewage." Well, all that money's pulling out, and it's got to come from somewhere. Other people's rates are going to go up, and that's why 2 years ago I said no to it, because I remember there was the presentation, and someone, I don't think it was me, asked, "Well, what's going to happen to other people's rates?" So if you're in a smaller home, your rates are going to go up. And I thought, that just doesn't seem fair. So are we talking about fair billing? Let everyone do it? Yeah, but let's be realistic that people's rates are going to go up. And if we haven't even considered with the nonprofits in town, whether we're talking Jewish Geriatric, Glen Meadow, Bay Path University starts putting these on, it could have a significant hit on
Most of those
everyone else's
places
bill.
have wells anyway, because of the cost of watering their,
That's
and in the town, we've got wells on our athletic fields.
Yes,
We've got-
I have no idea who does, but all I know is that people's rates are going to go up, so I
But our
can't
argument would
support
be,
it. Yeah.
I hear you, Marie, and I'm not
Yeah.
going to push this anymore. My argument would be, but it's accurate. But people pay for what, and you know what? And if the sewer rates end up going up, that's what our sewage is costing us.
Mhm.
You know, and
Well,
it's
we know we're
unfortunate.
supplementing it right now.
We don't know that. though.
We certainly
But
do.
we are, we don't know it.
I mean, Mike can tell you right now how many gallons of sewage he pumps from this town in a year's period of time as opposed to how much water is coming in. And he can also tell you how much water was billed, and when that water was billed, it was equal to the sewage being billed. And you look over here and say, well, we billed out 1 million CFCs over what we actually shipped out of here. I mean, we really do have a lot of that information now. It's available to the
That's
staff.
fine. I'm not gonna push this anymore.
No.
I just know that people have expressed an interest in doing it. We have the technology to do it. It makes it exact, and it makes it fair, and it makes it accurate. It may not make it lower
Yeah.
for some people, but, we're gonna end up with the point where, the cost of sewage is the cost of sewage. Right now, our sewer enterprise fund has a substantial balance in it because we bring in more money every year than we estimate to bring in,
Yeah, because we're selling sewage that's not being
But-
shipped.
But we also have a.
And is that fair to do?
No.
But there's a lot
So
of
then let's correct
infrastructure.
it.
Let's fix the infrastructure with the money we have sitting in there. There's problems with our sewer infrastructure.
And that's
Okay?
fine, Marie.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, come on.
So I do want to split the issue a little bit though, because we can go around and around on the meters. I don't think it's a question of fairness because the people who may feel like they're being billed unfairly have a choice. They can choose to modify their behavior generally to get under that cap. I do believe it is accuracy, though. We don't have meters on sewage, so you can't accurately bill that, and that's why it's tied to the water. All of that aside, the issue of the bylaw for the billing, and as I asked Paul to stay because he knows much more about this than I do, because they did the rate study, they did the analysis of the tiered rates, and then we got the determinations before my time from town council. You have to bill for actual consumption, which gets you out of the minimum charges or the fixed plus cost,
Just
right?
change your bylaw.
And you mentioned that at the beginning that we have a warrant coming up. Maybe now's the time to change the bylaw. We kind of got away from that in this discussion with the meters.
Right.
I truthfully think the cart before the horse, or to keep the horse in front of the cart. And I don't know. I'll defer to Paul if I'm wrong on this, but I felt, based on everything I've learned about this issue, that the bylaw really is the horse on this thing, and you should really address the bylaw for billing, which then opens up a whole new world of options moving forward. Is that, or does it not make a difference?
I would think you would do the bylaw first. I think you'd have better information. I don't think it's gonna make much of a difference either way, but I think, that bylaw is something we've been talking about for a long time also.
But the bylaw only shifts costs. It doesn't, and actually the bylaw is less fair and accurate because it's saying here's a fixed cost. I mean, it's the same bundle of money.
Same bundle of money, same
It's just
bottom
shifting the
line.
cost, that's all, and how we assess the cost. That's what it shifts.
And like I said, I don't know. I have not heard a hue and cry about it since I've been here, other than from this board.
Yeah, right.
And so I think what I want to convey is I think it's good to look at this type of stuff to see if there's a way we can do it more accurately in a way that not necessarily to generate additional revenue, but just to make sure that like I said, my big thing is stability of rates. Rate stability, I think, is the biggest for me. For public policy purposes, I believe stability of rates is a goal. It should be a goal. And so looking at these things to maintain stability of rates is worthwhile. That said, we don't really have a problem with our enterprise funds that we're trying to address in doing this. So there's no need to necessarily take action now because we're not trying to solve something, which is why I think doing the bylaw first, changing our billing structure, and then collecting data for the next term or so to say, okay, well, how should we adjust the cap? Should we do the meters? And then based on a billing structure that makes more sense to the town. That's my only point.
Yeah, as I say, there's cities out there, enormous cities compared to us, that have, found fairly innovative ways to do this to their satisfaction without having a lot of extra burden put on the people receiving the services. And this one here, the only problem I got is this forever burdens people down to $75 annual charge and everything else, and that's a lot of water and sewage to start with.
Well, nobody said we have to accept that.
Well, I mean, but the whole thing, the whole thing of having the meters when it's not needed, you can do without them. If we're open to allowing different processes.
On the warrant, do we have to have a motion on that, or we're just going to discuss it when we go article to article?
I think so.
So we don't need to do anything with the second one, because we already have it on. Okay.
I assume, Stephen, that you and our town council have come up with wording or whatever it is to for a warrant article proposal for the water billing?
We have not. I mean, we haven't really gotten a directive from the board to do that.
Well, I think, was
Did
there,
I think we need to have a discussion, because I don't know if everybody's on the same page with it.
Okay.
so we need to put a motion on the floor for discussion?
We can do it tonight, or we can do it at another time, but if
I-
we're gonna have a warrant article, that we really better do it.
Because I
soon.
thought we had,
I thought we had done that as
Yeah.
well, but.
Oh, you know what? She's right. I completely missed that.
oh.
I'm sorry.
It was to prepare a warrant article wording, so then we could discuss
Yeah,
it.
no, I have
without-
it right now.
So what, was that brought up the last meeting?
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Because I
then
was going to
this,
say, I'm like you, I must have been sleeping.
you,
No, that's on me. 100%. I apologize. It just didn't.
I mean, clearly, Paul, I think we will have a discussion, we ought to have a discussion, but we ought to have it in the context of at least we know what we're talking about.
so maybe next, when we do the warrant article by article, we can always,
Right.
if it gets voted down, it gets voted down, but we can do it then, I
Yeah,
guess.
And there are people who feel strongly about all of that stuff.
So what were you talking about?
For what?
For the warrant article?
Oh,
what-
just
what-
to have it
but-
prepared, so
so
we could discuss it.
The warrant article ought to be a recommendation, if it's adopted by the select board, to modify the bylaw that says, that currently says, water shall be billed by consumption, to say, water will be billed by, by either fixed plus consumption, or whatever wording we come up with that allows us to
Oh, yeah,
bill
yeah,
by
yeah.
a fixed plus
Right,
consumption.
you
as
have a
opposed to
fixed
just-
charge every
Right.
month, yeah. Yeah, minimum billing.
No, it's a fixed charge.
Yeah, it's a minimum billing.
Minimal bit.
Yeah, it's minimum billing.
We did have that.
Yeah.
When it got thrown out, but that's.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
Motion to adjourn.
Tomato and tomato.
Second.
All in favor?
Wait,
Aye.
did you have
Thank you,
something?
ladies and
Correspondence
gentlemen.
comes
We'll
after
s-
adjournment, so I suppose.
Let's see, I'm not sure when our next meeting is.
It's Thursday.
Is it the 5th? Okay, our
It's
next
on-
It's
meeting,
on the town calendar.
yeah, it's on the town calendar, so our next meeting is on the 5th. We'll see you then, and there'll be
was.
budget discussion that night. Have a good evening.
What was it?